Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Good morning. Welcome to The Crunch at breakfast on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through the politician's spin. Paul Brennan is busily moving to Queenstown. He's made it to Queenstown. The next time you hear him behind the mic, it will be from our new studio in Queenstown itself. And you all helped fund that studio, so thanks very much for that. Now, this morning, we're going to talk to Maurice Williamson to get a feel about what is going on in both the United States and also inside the Auckland Council. And then I'm going to have a chat with Simon Lusk about how to get an accurate read on what is happening in the US elections, who to follow, who to ignore, and what the polls are showing. Naturally, we'll hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about the sacking of the Health New Zealand board after multi-million-dollar shortfalls each month. And of course, we'll have the whale bag to get your feedback too. Now, don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Our RCR News is brought to you by the RCR Bytes editors, and our RCR Bytes are sent out every weekday to our Foundation Club members. Now, for those of you who are not yet members, RCR Bytes is how you stay up to speed with current events, breaking news, and censored stories in just a few minutes a day with hand-picked news from RCR, local New Zealand sources, and international outlets. Please visit realitycheck.radio/members to learn more. Okay, folks, so first up in the RCR Bytes news today is the government seeks to normalise mandates and lockdowns in a new pandemic plan. The Ministry of Health has published an update to its New Zealand pandemic plan, which attempts to normalise and make standard practice many of the oppressive measures used during the last COVID pandemic. Page 122 of the plan contains a list of mandated measures that includes vaccine mandates, requirements for other preventative treatment, quarantine and isolation requirements, restrictions on travel and movement, bans on going to work or congregating in public places, the commandeering of land and resources. Ironically, the plan notes that mandatory measures must be authorised by statute, or they are likely to be unlawful and contrary to the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. And this is what many protesters and people involved in the freedom movement argued the first time round. The updated New Zealand pandemic plan presents the first stage of a wider review into pandemic preparedness. It revises the 2017 influenza pandemic plan to reflect the 2022 health system reforms and the lessons learned from the COVID-19 response. Next up in New Zealand news, survivors march to Parliament as abuse inquiry report released. Survivors marched to Parliament on Wednesday as the Abuse in Care Royal Commission of Inquiry's final report was released 5 years after its establishment. The inquiry, investigating abuse in state and faith-based care from 1950 to 1999, is New Zealand's largest and most complex. It involved nearly 3,000 survivors, 1.1 million documents, and over 130 public hearings. Common abuses included sexual, verbal, and physical violence, over medicalisation and unsanitary conditions. Human rights lawyer Sonia Cooper said the state has failed and continues to fail those needing care, and billions of dollars would be needed for compensation along with ongoing support. Survivors bearing a ribboned banner with victims' names were greeted with a traditional welcome at Parliament. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon called the findings horrific and harrowing and will formally apologise on 12 November. Fonterra is to outsource labour and faces backlash for choosing profits over people. New Zealand dairy giant Fonterra plans to slash jobs at its Waikato base by outsourcing labour to India and the Philippines, aiming to enhance operational efficiency and financial returns for its farmer shareholders. The proposed restructuring, which will affect finance staff and potentially impact 51 additional roles, has sparked criticism from local stakeholders who advocate for preserving jobs within New Zealand to support the local economy and leveraging new technologies. This move, under the guise of efficiency, disregards the local workforce and community loyalty in favour of corporate gains. New Zealand approves DataGrid's land acquisition for an AI data centre. DataGrid, a New Zealand data centre company, has bought 6 more hectares in Makarewa, which we used to call Invercargill, pushing its South Island campus to 49 hectares. The New Zealand Overseas Investment Office approved the expansion. Founder Remy Galasso aims to create a major AI data centre zone powered by up to 1 gigawatt of renewable energy. CEO Perrine Dalun lauded the approval, highlighting Southland's strategic advantages. And now to international news. Mass protest against Israel at the US Capitol. Protesters staged a mass demonstration and sit-in at a congressional office building ahead of a planned speech by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the US Congress. There were multiple arrests, with protesters carrying signs that said, "Not in our name," and chanting, "Let Gaza live." The demonstrators focused their ire on the Biden administration and called for an end to arms shipments to Israel. In a related development, 7 major US trade unions have written a letter calling for US President Joe Biden to shut off aid to Israel. Just days out from the beginning of the Olympic Games in France, a video has emerged of an Arabic-speaking man threatening that rivers of blood will flow at the Paris Games over the West's support of the Zionist regime. Though people have been quick to pin the responsibility on Hamas, there is no direct connection. Nigel Farage calls for referendum on European Court of Human Rights. In his maiden speech to the UK Parliament, Nigel Farage focused heavily on the problem of immigration and the population explosion. He condemned both parties for allowing large numbers of immigrants to enter the country, leading to housing shortages and difficulties for British citizens in accessing basic services like healthcare. Farage claimed that it would be difficult to solve the immigration problem while the UK is still a member of the European Court of Human Rights, and proposed a referendum on continued membership. And turning now to our RCR Bytes news quick links, the Far North Mayor wants work to begin on a new mega project road as soon as possible. Taranaki Base Hospital maternity patients are forced to drink bottled water after pipes issue. Electric Kiwi, New Zealand's independent electricity retailer, says it's no longer taking on customers because of wholesale energy prices. Visa delays cost cash-strapped Te Pukenga tens of millions. And an Olympic spying scandal has erupted after Canada were caught flying a drone over a football Ferns training session. A quarter of houses in high flood risk areas are attracting extra insurance premiums of hundreds or even thousands of dollars, new Treasury data shows. Prominent anti-whaling activist has been detained in Greenland at Japan's request. And Bangladesh partially restores telecommunications services as protests taper off. After a week of controversy over the Trump assassination attempt, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle has resigned. American patriotic publication VDare is to shut down due to lawfare. Germany has banned the Islamic Center of Hamburg, IZH Association, for pursuing radical Islam. And the Spanish PM has called to testify in his wife's corruption case. And that's a wrap on our RCR Bytes news today. Welcome back to another edition of our show. This is where we dig into the heart of issues that matter most to you. Today, we're going to take a hard look at the latest shake-up in our health system, a topic that affects every single one of us. The new Commissioner of Health New Zealand, Te Whātau Ora, is Professor Lester Levy, and has stepped into the spotlight with some bold priorities: reducing waiting times, boosting productivity, and fostering compassion. Sounds great on paper, right? But let's dig deeper. On Monday, the government announced that Levy, who was appointed as chair of the organisation in May, would now replace the entire board as commissioner. This drastic move comes in response to serious concerns about oversight, overspend, and a troubling financial outlook. Health Minister Shane Reety has pointed out that the Health New Zealand is currently spending $130 million a month over its budget and is heading towards a staggering $1.3 billion deficit by the end of the financial year. So what's gone wrong? According to Reety, there's a massive overspend due to a bloated bureaucracy. We're talking about an additional 2,500 back office staff added since 2018 without any significant improvement in health metrics. This is a classic case of bureaucracy gone wild. When no one's watching the store, you end up with poor procurement processes, expired stock, and a payroll that's out of control. Levy himself admits the organisation is totally bloated with bureaucracy, and he promises to tackle this issue head-on and refocus on patients. But we've heard all these promises before. The question is, can he deliver this time? And let's not forget, Health New Zealand was formed by merging the 20 district health boards under the previous Labour government. The aim was to cut costs and eliminate inconsistent care across regions, the so-called postcode lottery. But instead of streamlined efficiency, we got a tangled mess of bureaucracy. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has pointed out the glaring lack of healthcare targets and outcomes. He lays the blame squarely on the previous government's approach, which created a giant, inefficient machine. Luxon is right to highlight the financial and organisational performance issues, but we need more than finger-pointing. We need solutions. And then there's Labour's counterattack. Labour leader Chris Hipkins criticises the current government for overstating its intervention at Health New Zealand. He claims the government is manufacturing problems to justify its budget decisions. Pot kettle black, Mr. Hipkins. It's a political tug-of-war with both sides trading blows over who is to blame for the financial blowout. Health Minister Dr. Shane Reety has been clear. The overspending is due to unnecessary staffing increases, poor procurement, and a lack of oversight. And he insists that changes are being made to push responsibilities and accountabilities for budgets into the regions, aiming to bring decision-making closer to the local level. But critics like Sarah Dalton from the Association of Senior Medical Specialists, a doctors' union, argue that the health system is understaffed and underfunded. And she paints a grim picture of services stretched to their limits, with not enough doctors, nurses, or allied health workers to meet the needs of New Zealanders. Her perspective raises a critical point. Can we afford to cut budgets further when our health system is already struggling? Former Te Whātau Ora Chair Rob Campbell agrees with Luxon that we can't keep throwing money at a broken system. And he believes the issues are not just financial, but also stem from mismanagement and underfunding. He points the finger at the Ministry of Health, the key player in setting targets and budgets for Te Whātau Ora. The bottom line, though, is that our health system is in crisis. Levy's appointment as Commissioner and his focus on reducing wait times, increasing productivity, and showing more compassion are steps in the right direction. But let's hold our applause until we see real results. This isn't just about financial management, it's about ensuring that every New Zealander gets the care they deserve. Stay tuned as we continue to hold our leaders accountable and push for a health system that works for all of us.
Are you on the RCR mailing list? Never miss a beat of the news and hard-hitting stories you've come to know and love. Stay in the loop. Visit realitycheck.radio/email.
Maurice Williamson is a current Auckland councillor, a former national MP, and he was the Consul General to Los Angeles, as well as being a good friend. He's on the line now to discuss the mindset of American politics from a perspective of someone who represented New Zealand, and I'll ask him about the latest goings-on in the Auckland Council. Welcome back to The Crunch, this time at breakfast, Maurice. Good to have you back.
Very good to be back.
I thought I'd get you on to talk about a couple of things. Firstly, what's going on in the United States. I mean, you used to be the Consul General for New Zealand in Los Angeles, so you've probably got a bit of a feel about how people think and operate around politics in the US. And the second thing we'll do is touch on what's happening at Auckland Council and the revelations about the growth of road cones.
They're like the Daleks.
Yeah, so let's just talk about the US. It's been an incredible 2 weeks. First of all, we had the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, and there's all sorts of theories out there about what went on. And unfortunately, I mean, this is an event that's had literally thousands of people with phones videoing, and there's an analysis of sound and all sorts of things we've never seen before, looking into things. That upended the presidential campaign. Then we saw President Joe Biden announce that he's ill and he's withdrawing from the race, but he's still going to be the president in the interim and in endorsing Kamala Harris. What's your view on this, having sat in the United States for, 5 years or so, admittedly in the Socialist Democratic Republic of California, but it gives you an insight anyway.
Yeah, I did. I was responsible for 11 states, so that did include things like Arizona and Colorado, which were a little less to the left of the extreme that California can be. I always like to try to say to people, there is no such country as the United States. There are 50 very separate countries. And if you are in Oklahoma and talking to people there, and then you're in New Hampshire and talking to people there, you literally wouldn't believe it was the same country. Their thoughts and their views are so extremely different. So I guess the first thing to get to everybody's head is that this does not come down to being a national election. You can forget nearly all of the states. They will all go the same way as they do. The number of voting delegates to the Electoral College will be given, and it's really down to the swing states, to the Michigans, Wisconsins, Nevada and Arizona are now in that mix. Pennsylvania, I've got 7, and Georgia has moved into my 7 of the swing states. When Donald Trump got elected in 2016, I think it was 55,000 people, which is less than the number of voters in the Pakuranga electorate, determined the presidency in those swing states. Had they voted another way, you would have flipped a couple of them. The Electoral College numbers would have gone. So there's a big magnifier in the outcome based on Electoral College. I think the world finally saw an election result delivered to you the night of the debate. Halfway through the debate, I turned to my wife and I said, that's all over. It's all finished. Biden's gone. And she said, he'll try to hang on. I said, no, you cannot turn in a performance like that where you literally didn't know who you were, what you were, and where you were. And your opponent was able to say, well, I didn't know what he even said, and I don't think he did. And there was real merit to it. It's just a tragedy that a country that is, in my view, the greatest nation on the planet can also be the worst nation on the planet for just its political management. I think the Democratic Party officials need a good horsewhipping because they've allowed something that was clearly not functional for a long time to just sort of fester on, and to have a scene at the end of that debate where Joe Biden's wife is saying, you did really well, Joe. You answered all the questions like he was a little kid at primary school and she's giving him a little pat on the head and maybe an apple. I don't think there's now a question about the election outcome. I think Trump will win the election comfortably, no matter what the Democrats put together as whoever their ticket will be. I think there's enough endorsements now to guarantee Kamala Harris will get the presidential nomination, and it's a matter of which one of I've got 5 or 6 governors in play and at least one Senator Mark Kelly in play. But I just think it's all over for them. And I think, you can tell people, you heard it on your channel first this Thursday morning, that the outcome of the result will be a President Trump return to power.
I looked also at the stand-up that Biden did after the NATO conference, and I thought it was cruel and unusual to put him through that, and he was, again, all at sea.
That's a little bit like what they used to do with popes. There used to be popes that were so old they couldn't stand, and they would wheel them out and get them to lift their hand and wave to the crowd, and you kept saying, this is just wrong. Stop it right now. There is a time, and Muhammad Ali was like that as a boxer. He was, in my view, the greatest boxer on the planet, and he got to a point where he was just standing there shaking, couldn't stand properly, and going on, I am the greatest. It's actually cruel, and if these people had any sense, they would have said early on, you're slipping down the ladder very quickly. We've got to find a way to exit you out of here. And he actually had said himself at the beginning of the 2020, when he got in, that this would be a transition presidency in order to bring new blood through and so on. So there would have been no dishonor or disgrace to just doing the one term in order to do the transition. But I guess power corrupts, and all power corrupts absolutely. And he saw it as a really good opportunity to, do a second term. And it was, I watched some of the stuff. Do you see the clips of him coming off Air Force One and walking those steps and so on? It's almost the people that are arranging it were just being really, really cruel.
It's like the Soviet Union used to do with, leaders like Brezhnev, or Yuri Andropov, who was
some of them were really old,
who was reportedly dead for months before they announced it. It's almost Weekend at Bernie's if it wasn't just so cruel for somebody who has spent a lifetime, in Congress and the Senate.
Correct. But if you think of the big decisions a president makes, I mean, I've been in the cabinet for some years, and I know that we get a lot of decisions that are quite tough, and there's a lot of backroom meetings and so on. And yet New Zealand's a little minnow player, so we haven't got that big world, let's go to war and blow the entire planet up stuff that's on their books. If you think of the guy that couldn't even stand there, and it dates back way before the debate. He did things like standing on a platform somewhere, calling up one of the local congresswomen to come and say hello, and they had to sort of say to him, Joe, she died 3 months ago. Oh, that's right, she died, yes. And if you think of that level of cognitive awareness, and then you put in front of them a huge big combinatorics and permutation maps of the options for, what's Putin doing in Ukraine and what are we going to do about this and that. You know that he hasn't obviously been president for that period of time. He has been literally others doing all that work, and he's just been sort of nodding in the chair. It's tragic.
It's a sad demise, really.
Yeah, it's a tragic thing to happen. And I guess that's the one. I've always had this line I use, that my favourite All Black of all time was Graham Murray. He was a fantastic All Black. He was an amazing captain. He was just a player beyond belief. And one day at the very peak of his career, when everyone thought he had several years to go, he said, that's it, I'm retiring. Bang, gone. And I've never held more respect for anybody who recognised they were at the peak of their ability. They'd done everything they wanted to. There was no more to achieve, and he left. I'm seeing a bit of the opposite of that on the news this day, because I've been watching some of the golf. And Tiger Woods, who was indeed, in my view, the greatest golfer ever, is still in there, and he's just missing the cut, and it's not working. And it can't be for the money, because he's worth hundreds of millions, and it can't be for anything else. Please just know when your time is up and enjoy your retirement.
I remember Max Bradford saying to me, at the end of the Bolger years, He said, "Oh, it's really strange." He says, "I walk down the main street of Wellington and nobody talks to me. In fact, I've seen people who I know really well who are crossing the road and I don't know what it's about." And I said to him, "Max, it's because you're losing."
Yeah, it's also that, in politics, especially if you're a minister, you're a rooster today and a feather duster tomorrow. You've got my phone never stopped. People wanting to, invite you to a meal and we go to the rugby together and so on. And I got some really good advice from an crusty old national minister once called Warren Cooper. He says, "Just let me tell you, young boy, let me tell you, young fella, Williamson, you'll be a minister in the new government and you'll get excited about the number of people who are your friends. And they'll want to be chatting to you and there'll be dinners and, can we meet you and take you to the rugby and so on. And you just need to know that one day when the result of the election is the opposite, you'll be hard pressed up against the glass watching all the officials and everyone walking into the other building to meet the new minister. They'll have the exact same greeting. Minister, good to have you on board, looking forward to working with you. And your phone will just stop. So don't be upset about it. It's just the way the world is. And the moment you begin to think that you're something special or that you're really important, you've lost the plot. As I said, you're a rooster today and you're a feather duster tomorrow in that game.
So the Democrats look like they're coalescing around Kamala Harris. Is that going to change the outcome, do you think?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, I don't think they know what to do because of the short time frame. We've only seen, I think there's only 2 presidents of modern history, anyway, that have bailed out after one term. And that was obviously, both of them actually had part terms from what I understand. Lyndon Johnson had a part term and then he had the term. And who was it that took over at the end of the Second World War when Roosevelt died? Truman. He ended up with a one term and then he walked. But they all left in the very early part of the election year, those two. They left in, I think, March. They were both gone by. This is now coming up August in a week's time, when the one convention's held and the other party's holding their convention. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do it. They're scared witless of the mantle that she was just given a coronation and just handed it, because that will cost her badly with the voters. So I see even she's saying now she'll have to fight to win the support of the delegates and it'll be a contest and so on. I don't think it will be. I think you'll find that the backroom boys, I know a number of people in both political parties because I had a lot of contact with them up there. I think they'll be moving heaven and earth to get her wheeled in. They'll be working. I think it's either going to be Governor Andy Beshear from Kentucky. I go with maybe Ray Cooper from North Carolina, Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania, or finally, those are all governors, or a Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona. They always seem to pick the vice president candidate that is that balance, and as I said, John Kennedy had Lyndon Johnson. One was North, one was South, one was old, one was young, one was conservative, one was liberal, because you want to have that balance of the ticket. There has been a lot of talk on the media that she'll be looking to pick a running mate that will be able to bring their state across the line. But if you go and do the analytics that I've done, very few people have ever brought their own state across the line unless it already was.
She's a Democrat. California's a Democrat state. She didn't bring the state across and didn't increase the vote, did she?
No. And that will be the case. There may be one of your political operatives who really know their stuff might be able to find 1 or 2 cases, but I've got a lot of examples where people put in someone to be their vice presidential nominee, and it didn't make any real difference, even in the vice president nominee's state, let alone elsewhere. I mean, it's so incredible how little known they are. Ask your listeners today. I mean, who was Jimmy Carter's vice president?
No idea.
Yeah.
Even I don't know.
Walter Mondale. He was picked to try to give the balance of North and South and East and West and tall and short. And in the gender stakes, you can't even have that balance now because it's not binary anymore. There's not male and female. It's one of anything. So who knows what might happen there.
Yeah, those people that you named as potential vice president picks for Kamala Harris, nobody's ever heard of them.
No, that's again in American politics. Actually, it's true here in sort of our local politics. If you look at the number of people that have got onto the Auckland Council, for example, have been people like Dick Quacks, the runner, or John Walker, the runner, or a rugby player, or a whatever. People that are well known, if their name is well known, and Arnold Schwarzenegger winning the governorship of California, and that's just because there's such a well-known name. People go to the polls and will vote for a name they know. If you'd ask people across the United States, other than in Kentucky, who's Andy Beshear, no one would know. I mean, just no one. The people of Kentucky would know. If you asked, even Gretchen Whitmer in, I think you can rule her out in Michigan, because I don't think you could have a ticket that was too female. So people keep saying, oh, she's a possibility, but it would be a complete devastation if you went with both candidates being female.
Yeah, I look, it's harder to pick than a broken nose, I guess, for the Democrats. A way forward for them, because the tragedy of Joe Biden and the inanity of Kamala Harris don't add up to victory.
What I also think is the sort of the big subterfuge is you'll hear the Democrats saying, he's been the greatest president, we've ever had. What he's achieved is outstanding, the best economy, the best outcomes. And all I can tell you is if you talk to people in the street up there, which I do, I've been back a few times and I've talked to people by cell phone quite a lot, that, they are suffering just as much as we are from the cost of living crisis. They are hurting up there. There are forced mortgagee sales. There are people struggling to fill the tank with gas or pay for groceries. Those are the things that matter to how you vote. And if that's hurting people, they will vote you out. And I think her biggest weakness by a million miles will have been that she was appointed to this really big job title after she became vice president of the Tsar of the southern border. And she was going to go down there and clean it up. Now, had she done so, she'd have been almost a superhero in the eyes of the Americans to have actually dealt to it and fixed it and so on. What it ended up with was way worse than had they done nothing. And there were just people flooding across the border daily, being given Prezi cards and hotel rooms in New York. And the American public just got, I can tell you, I've got some quite liberal friends in California who you'd normally say would be on the end of what Kamala Harris was doing was fine, saying this is just outrageous. And if she was put through a performance assessment of how well she didn't even go down to the border for a whole, I think, for the first couple of years. So, if I was put in charge of the ports of Auckland or something, I think very first day after I was appointed, I'd go to the ports and sit in the office for a few days and say, I want to see the books, I want to go through the data, I want to see this, So she's not got this great track record, although they will talk up a big game of it won't work with the public if they're hurting.
And not in those states. I mean, the Texas governor has been, busing and flying all these immigrants to the sanctuary cities.
Yes.
And the sanctuary cities are now bursting at the seams and going, what's going on? Well, all of those sanctuary cities who said all of that are on the border of Canada, not on the border of Mexico.
Yes. But in the end, I've always had this theory that, people don't vote on whether you've changed the flag, or people don't vote on gay marriage or whatever. They vote on one or two simple things: their hip pocket and their kids' future. And when they wake up in the morning and they put their feet on the floor beside the bed, things shoot through their mind, like, is my job safe, or is that talk we're going to big layoffs and I might be able to work within a month? That's what matters to them, and that's what they vote on. Secondly, there's a black mole on my wife's shoulder. Is that a melanoma? And if so, will the health system look after her, or will she be a waiting list and die of cancer waiting? Are my kids getting a schooling that will set them up for the world of the future and be able to participate, or will they end up just being a cleaner at some place because they've got no quality? There's about 3 or 4 things. It's about health and education, it's about law and order, and it's about hip pocket stuff. If you think of all of those, if you think of the law and order stuff in the United States, if you think of the education system and its standard of delivery right now, you and the healthcare. I mean, he goes on, I've made inhalers only $35. I'm sorry, the health system up there is stuffed. literally stuffed in terms of its costs and explosion and the billions that insurance will cost and the companies making fortunes. I don't think there's people wandering around there that say, wow, he's really fixed the health system. That is fantastic. So I'm telling you, I will repeat it again. I think you can say that on the 6th of January, or whenever the date will be, you'll be seeing a 47th President Donald Trump sworn in as also. There's only happened ever once. There's only ever been one president ever that was, I think, the 22nd and the 24th. Can't remember who it was now. Grover Cleveland, I think, is the one that went back a second time.
Yeah. Well, there's going to be some big changes coming up in the US, but let's move on to Auckland.
Can I do one last thing? I'm really worried about the weakened USA right now, and right through until middle of January, whatever the swearing date will be. I'm really worried that what you'll see is the opponents to the United States cribbing a whole lot of ground and making a whole lot of pressure push. Putin will now be strengthened for what he does in the Ukraine. Xi Jinping will be way more strengthened to take action into Taiwan or the South China Seas. It's a shame that because for the next 6 months you're going to have not just a lame duck president, which you often have, but you'll almost have a dead duck president in place.
Yeah, it'll be a tragedy. Auckland Council, Maurice, what's going on there? I see that there's some revelations about the sea of road cones that everyone experiences.
Yeah, a lot of that's got to do with central government. It went back to national government to start with after the Pike River explosion, and then they had this big review of health and safety in the workplace. And the recommendations were, in my view, way over the top, way extreme compared to what the requirement was. And I actually announced publicly that I would cross the floor and vote against the things like corporate manslaughter, which finally the National Party pulled out of, because you were going to go to jail if someone died in your company, even if you'd provided them with all the safety equipment and briefings and everything else. What happened was we then found out that instead of being able to stick a road cone at the beginning of a street and say, water main fixing, and people just drove around it, you had to put 475,000 road cones up every side street. You had to have people with stop-go signs so someone could get a spanner out and untighten up the nuts on a water main leak. And it's now got to be to the point where it's laughable. The best example I can ever give you is because my mum was really ill in Waikato Hospital at the end of last year, I was up and down to Hamilton every second day. And your listeners will know about this, but State Highway 1 around Rangariri, which normally would have been 110 and is back to 100, had just cones and signs up for 5 months saying 70K. Nobody adhered to it. Everyone still drove at 110, so they were all breaking the law. And there was no work. The people that were going to lay the chip seal weren't ready and they couldn't get a contract. And so they just left all of them, the cones up and all the 70K sign up. And the New Zealand Transport Agency needed to absolutely have a flogging over that, because it is just, and that's what I think the mayor's really going for it about. Let's have a regime where if you abuse the privilege of being able to put road cones to block off something when it's necessary and vital, and then you just leave them there for several days with no work going on, you'll pay a big price for that. And I'm a big fan of that.
It's spreading everywhere, though, because in the apartment building where I live, there was a guy doing some work on a hand sanitizer on the wall. He had 7 cones.
Yep.
And the little barrier things that put over the top.
Yep.
And a warning sign and tape, so that he could screw on and screw off this hand sanitizer. And I stood there and, I said to the property manager who was standing there supervising, hands on hips, I said, so we've got road cones infesting the building now.
Yep.
And he said, well, it's health and safety. I said, it's bollocks.
Of course it is. And no one wants to see people injured in the workplace, and no one wants to see people
trip over the road cones.
But just realistically, people drown in the bath every year. Should we outlaw baths and have a government agency going house to house, ripping them out, and you'd be prosecuted if you're found to have a bath in your property. And everyone laughs when you say that to them in an audience. You say, well, it's just how crazy it is. There will be people die on our roads. There will be people who die from an aeroplane crash or whatever. You've got to understand there is a risk associated with every human activity. What you've got to try and do is have safety at reasonable cost. My wife, Raywin, pointed out to me that something she remembers. There used to be trucks where guys could hang off the side of them and hand down and pick up the cones, 1, 2, 3, and would come along at the end of the day and pick all the cones up and put them back on the truck, and the next morning go out and relay them. So it meant that the roads were all clear for use when they weren't doing work at them. Now they'll leave the site without any work for weeks, if not months. And that Rangariri State Highway 1 was months. No work, but just inconvenience the public because no incentive. And by the way, what they're paying to rent an orange cone would make your head spin. I just wish that when I was a young man, I'd wanted to get into the orange cone manufacturing because I would be a multi-millionaire now.
I mean, there is ludicrous rules. I mean, take swimming pool fences. There was a case, this isn't in the far north, so it's not in Auckland Council, but it just shows you the absolute stupidity of bureaucrats. There's a remote island somewhere near the Cavalli Islands.
Yep.
There's 3 houses on the island. It's privately owned.
Yep.
And the owners put in a pool at the high tide mark. And the council has flown over it, has photographed it, has sent out 5 people to survey, and then served an abatement notice to the owners saying you need to fence your pool. When if you walk off the edge of the pool and the surround,
you're in the ocean.
You're 2 meters from the ocean.
But Cameron, there's ripper examples. One in Cambridge once was a farmer being absolutely persecuted for the no proper fencing around the swimming pool. And just across the paddock, a little way, only 50 meters across the paddock, was a huge horse trough swimming pool where they trained the horses with a rope on either side and they walk them into the deep pool and then they get them just using their legs and so on. And that didn't have to be fenced. And you just go, oh, come on, that's a huge pool of water and you don't have to. But this one, here where I live along the Rotary Walkway around Pakuranga, and you've got the Tamaki River right there, there are all these houses that drop down straight at the back of their section. You drop straight down into the river. And there's no need to have any of that fenced. But if you've got a swimming pool up on your property, that has to be. So it's, again, I'm a big fan of stopping kids from drowning and doing things that make sense and trying to stop things. But like everything, these rules just go over the top. And I am delighted that the mayor's just said, enough's enough. Good news that Simeon Brown, the minister, agrees with them totally, unlike Michael Wood, who was, almost the orange cone king of the country. And they hopefully are going to do something. And as Brown, but they're both Brown, Mayor and Minister Brown, but Mayor Brown is saying what you need is some penalties against the contracting companies who just, when they close up at the day, couldn't give a stuff at what inconvenience they're causing. There's no penalty to them. Why would they bother? Well, how about there are some really severe penalties if you just leave a site all blocked and stopped and you can't move around, or the public can't move around, but you didn't need to because there's no work going on.
Well, that's the problem, is we elect politicians like Michael Wood, whose sole work experience was knowing how to measure an inside seam at Hugh Wright's. And then they put these big jobs and they don't know how to do it. And his latest thing, he's now apparently working in a Labour MP's office, but he's now a spokesperson for some new fangled gun control organisation. And I'd suggest he's never handled a gun in his life.
Well, I mean, his speed limit reduction stuff, it's got to be thought about. We're trying in council right now to either back or argue against the minister's proposal for things like school zones. And they're arguing, no, we should have 30K past a school, no matter what, no matter where. Now, the first thing they haven't taken account of is there's about 12 weeks of the year the schools don't sit. So let's multiply just the weekdays there. So you've got 5 weekdays times 12, that's 60 days. You've then got 52 weeks of the year where there's no school on 2 of those days. So that's another 104. We're about 180, I think, with statutories and others, about 180 days where the school doesn't even meet. And yet you're telling me that everybody driving past those on the 180 days, which is nearly half the year, basically, you're telling me people driving past those have got to stuck at 30k when there's no kids, there's no school, there's no danger. Or what about a tradie leaving home at 5 a.m. to go off to work somewhere, goes past a school, it was 30k, he did 50. There was no kids because kids don't come for another 3 hours yet. And the cops can ping them. So it's just insanity. Again, what I want them to focus on is there a problem? Like if kids were getting killed at my local school, my kids all went to Sunny Hills Primary. If there was kids getting injured or killed there, I'd be the first one to want to do something about safety. But they did. The AT came in and did this massive amount of roundabouts and cones, and they completely disrupted everything. And when you asked how many serious crashes or deaths had occurred, the answer was none and none. And you go, so what was it, the problem you were trying to solve again?
Oh, exactly. We see this all the time. We're really up against time now, Maurice. I've got this morning slots giving me a bit of sweat, having to fill in for Paul Brennan. But thank you so much for coming on, and
My pleasure. Have a good day.
Thank you. There's some really good insights there from Maurice, and he's a political tragic like I am. There's still a long way to go until November and lots more water to pass under the American political bridges before then. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Simon Lusk is probably one of those most in tune with American politics. He listens to podcasts on his way to his favorite fishing and hunting spots. Let's talk with Simon now and find out his views on what is going on in the US, who he follows and listens to, and more importantly, who he ignores. Good morning, Simon. Welcome to the Crunch at breakfast. I hope I haven't interrupted you getting out to your favorite hunting spot.
No, Cam. I'm going hunting this afternoon. Happy to be on the radio with you.
I thought I'd get you on because, one of your sayings I use all the time, it's harder to pick than a broken nose. And, this last 2 weeks, we've watched the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And, a lot of people were sitting there saying, oh, he's won the election now. And you're going, not so much, not sure on that. Now we've got Joe Biden quitting the race and the absolute tragedy of his exit. How are you reading this? What are you listening to? What are you reading about this? Basically tell the listeners how you keep yourself informed as a political consultant about what's going on in the United States.
Well, the first thing is I follow the guys that have got a proven track record at winning campaigns, and that means Pod Save America, who are Obama's guys, and they were pretty scathing about Biden, and to the extent that Biden was getting stuck into them for not being supportive enough. But they're also realists. They're very liberal, but they know about winning. And then I follow Hacks on Tap, which is Mike Murphy and David Axelrod. And people may remember that Axelrod was one of the first to come out and say Biden can't win because he's too old. And Biden's team went absolutely nuts at Axelrod. But Axelrod was right. From the midterms in 2022, the numbers were really, really tough on Biden. People just didn't think he was fit to be president. It wasn't. They didn't like his policies or what he'd done. They just thought he was too old. And, that isn't something that you can ever recover. And he'd gone out with the watch me, and we did watch him. And within about the first 3 minutes of the debate, it was obvious that he was well past it and wasn't fit to be president. And that meant that he got rolled.
Well, the next week he appeared after the NATO conference, and I know you were watching it because we were chatting at the time, and I was watching it, and I thought what we were watching was cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, he just wasn't up to it, but he didn't realise it. And I take a somewhat different view to many people who thought the media were covering for him. I think the media were absolutely furious that he hadn't been given, they hadn't been given access to him. So they sort of heard that he wasn't that flash, but every time they said something, they'd get bashed by the Biden team. And when it turned out he was a doddering old git, they absolutely went spastic and really went after him. I mean, you and I were sharing screenshots of New York Times front pages that were just like, it was 3 weeks of unremitting brutality, saying this guy's got to get out.
The Democrats have got a real problem now, though, don't they?
Look, I don't know that they necessarily got a real problem. I think that anyone that is making bold predictions at the moment is just deluded. The only prediction that I think you can really make is that the election is likely to be very, very tight and come down to a few thousand votes in 3 or 4 states. I don't think that there's going to be a landslide against the Democrats now, and I don't see that the Republican vote's going to collapse either. But beyond that, you're very brave to make any predictions. I mean, so many guns in America, it only takes one nutcase with a gun to change it again.
What about the claims that you're seeing in some of the media in the United States that Kamala Harris is in the same position as Jacinda Ardern when, Labor replaced Andrew Little as the leader and selected her, and then Ardern went on to win? Personally, I find that specious because she's the incumbent, and whereas Bill English was on the way out, and so it doesn't resonate for me as an excuse. What do you think?
I think it's bullshit. I mean, they're just deluded. Jacinda was personally very, very popular, running a campaign where she didn't need to win a plurality. She needed to win the coalition negotiations, which she did. A very different matter than a head-to-head race with an electoral college. Jacinda had very high net favourables. Kamala Harris's net favourables are sort of minus 15 or something. So she's not popular like Jacinda was in 2017. What she does have is a huge number of people that want to beat Trump who are throwing vast amounts of money at her. I think she got $81 million in the first 24 hours. And that's before they really turn the taps on. It'll be a multi-billion-dollar campaign.
Simon, Nate Silver has a reputation as getting things right, although I'm not sure it's 100% now. Certainly made a big name for himself. He subsequently left 538 and gone out on his own. He runs an election model, but 538 is also running an election model. Which one are you following, or are you looking at both of them or others?
Look, I am not looking at Elliot Morris's 538 model. It just looks ludicrous. And I think that it had Biden and Trump neck and neck, which just doesn't make any sense at all to anyone that's got any political insight. Silver's model is a work in progress and is pretty good, but I'm also watching The Economist. They've got a decent model, and the New York Times, the tilt is always worth following Nate Cohen. And it's like what Farrell always tells us about polling. You never look at one poll, you look at everyone's poll and you sort of net it all out. And I think that as long as it's not an absolute outlier like Morris's 538 one, which was saying Biden and Trump were neck and neck, you can look at the models and work it out for yourself. But they're all saying it's a pretty tight race, and it's going to be very tight in the swing states.
When do you think we'll get an indication in the polls about the fallout of the last couple of weeks?
I don't know that. I think I always defer a polling question to our Pinko mate. He'd be able to give a better answer than I would.
Yeah. Those swing states are vitally important. That's what Maurice Williamson was saying to me in 2020 and 2016. The number of votes that decided the election race was about 55,000 votes in about 5 states. Do you think that's going to be the same for this election?
You'd expect so. It's a polarised electorate. There is going to be vast amounts of money trying to expand the electorate, but no one's quite sure how that's going to work. And the polls are pretty tight at the moment. The polls are showing that Trump is ahead in most of the swing states, but that was against Biden, and there's still over 3 months before Election Day. So a lot could happen between now and then.
During the 2020 election, Kamala Harris got absolutely slaughtered in the Democrat leadership stakes by another candidate, just pointing out her appalling record as a prosecutor, a history of grandstanding, and just tore her apart, and she ended up with about 2 or 3% of the vote and dropped out. Is there a risk now that Democrats have wedded themselves to basically a flake candidate who giggles at the slightest drop of a hat and doesn't have any substance?
Yeah, but she's not got dementia, which is a big improvement, and America's pretty polarised. She was underwhelming. I thought she would do better in the first in the 2020 primaries. She got 20,000 people along to her launch in Oakland, and she did some really good campaigning stuff with historically black college women's groups, and she just missed out somewhere. I think there was probably a degree of no one really trusted her and didn't think she was very authentic. But yeah, at the moment she's likely to be a vessel for what the Democrats want, and what they want to do is beat Trump at all costs. So they'll probably overlook the fact she's not a great candidate and just get behind her.
But if I was Trump, I'd just bash her all day long on her performance on the border of the southern states.
Yeah, and I think that's inevitably going to happen. And it'll be interesting to see whether she just comes out and says, well, I wasn't able to do what I really wanted to because Joe wouldn't let me, and see what Trump has to say there. And, you know, the dynamics of attacking a female opponent are not... It's not always bad, but I would want to be testing that really hard before I would go after her. I think it's inevitable that immigration is going to be an issue, but how much they make it her problem. One of the things that I've been interested in is that there's a whole lot of left-wing ratbags going on about how she's going to be more pro-Gaza. I'm thinking, I don't know about that. Yeah, the Jewish lobby is wonderful, and unlike ours, they invest a lot of money, and I don't know that she's necessarily going to be more progressive on Israel, and I don't think there's very many votes in it. She might sort of say, oh yeah, we've got to win Dearborn and Michigan, but I'm just not sure that that's actually going to happen.
Well, we've just seen the Jewish lobby in the United States take out a sitting, was it a senator or a congressman they took out? Ran a very...
Congressman.
Yeah, they ran a very robust campaign, and that person was actually one of what they call the squad, the ultra left-wing radical type congressman tipped out because of significant campaigning against him.
And Jewish groups put 15 million plus into beating him because he was soft on Israel, soft on Gaza, and didn't believe that rape and murder and terrorism needed to be dealt with as firmly as the Israelis are dealing with it.
I really struggle when I watch videos of Kamala Harris, and you know what I do when I analyse politicians. I turn the sound off and watch their facial expressions, looking for micro expressions. I then close my eyes and listen to them speak, and then I can see where they're lying and things like that. I'm not vibing Kamala Harris, but I'm not sure the electorate is as switched on as you or I. They would probably just vote for her because she's a woman.
Yeah, look, I think there are probably going to be a lot of people that are going to vote for her because she's not Donald Trump. And the polls that I'm going to be really interested in is the swing voters that are called double haters, who hated both Biden and Trump, and do they hate Harris as well? And that could be the determining factor in the election, is what happens to the double haters.
Yeah, they might actually hate her slightly less or more, depending on her performance. She's really going to be in the hot seat, though, and really be under the gun. And all of the videos of her with her trite little statements that she uses in almost every speech is just going to get replayed over and over and over again, and people are going to sit there and go, really? Like, seriously? Are you on this planet? Because that's the feeling I get, that she's not all there. I mean, yes, she hasn't got dementia, but she doesn't seem to have any sort of position on anything, and would probably be a pole-driven fruitcake.
Well, she could well be, but she just keeps coming out and saying, I'm not Trump, and that may be enough.
Mm. Well, it'll be interesting to see if that does come through. So who do you think is not worth actually listening to? We've already covered the 538 guys who seem to be out to lunch.
Oh, no, that's the model. I still like the 538 podcast. Those guys are quite sensible. It's just the model is out of whack. There's some. I mean, I have a real prejudice wanting to listen to campaigners because they're just realistic, and it's very much like how you and I can get on with all the left-wing campaigners, and we may not be able to get on with even the right-wing politicians. But the backroom people were just, they're realists. Like they're not going to say, "Oh, this is going to happen." They'll, if they don't believe it, they've got to believe that something's going to happen before they'll say it. So, I follow those guys closely. There's some good pollers. Christian Soltis Anderson, and there's a number of others. Sarah Longwell. Anytime they speak on any of the podcasts I listen to, they're really good because it's like talking to Farrow. He doesn't project his feelings on the polls. He just gives us the numbers.
I've been following for a while the Liberal Patriot on Substack, and I don't agree with them on politics, but they have some pretty good articles that middle of the road and an explanation that is easy to understand for most people. On the other side of that, you've got people like Simon Rosenberg, who is an absolute sycophant for anything Democrat. And just 3 days ago was pushing on about how Biden was going to win the election and everything like that. And now he's writing about how fantastic Kamala Harris is, and it's all good. The campaign's on track. And I really struggle to believe a word he says because he's such a lock for the Democrats.
Yeah, I also love the Liberal Patriot. I think those guys are really good, and they're once again, they're backroom people. Now, the Hopium Chronicles, which you mentioned, he, in his defence, was about the only one that picked what happened in the midterms, and he believes that the fundamentals were going in favour of the Democrats, and that's why the Republicans didn't win anywhere near as many seats as they thought they would. But he might as well have just put Biden's Pravda on his bloody website because that's what he was like, Pravda. It just wasn't objective.
You don't have credibility when you're not objective.
No. And I think The Economist had a wonderful line where they said that Biden, the politician who prides himself on his common touch, seems to be asking us not to have any common sense. And that's just like, we'd all looked at Biden, and whether we liked him or not, it was just obvious he wasn't fit to be president.
He just looked like a curmudgeonly old man who had slowly but surely ebbed away.
Yeah, and unfortunate, and obviously disappointing for him, but it's just the reality. And I've had many arguments with people about whether the media were covering for him, and the left-wing podcasts, some of the other ones like the New Yorker and some of the New York Times ones, have just been really scathing, and they're sort of saying, well, the media have gone after Biden and Biden's team because we thought this was the case, but they wouldn't let us see Biden, so we couldn't know. And he missed the softball Super Bowl interview, and just missed opportunities to get out and sell his vision. And it was because he couldn't be trusted to actually speak properly without a teleprompter and in an interview situation.
And even when he did use a teleprompter, you get all sorts of garbled nonsense coming out. But to be fair, so does Donald Trump when he's...
Oh, yeah. Neither of them are, great orators. But look, the other person that there's two politicians in America that I think that anyone that really understands how politics works really admires, and that's Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell, and both of them are just utterly ruthless at getting stuff done. And it was like Pelosi was the one that was really after Biden because she could see them losing Congress really badly. Flung in behind Harris and said, well, it probably means Harris is going to win. If Pelosi's behind her, no one's going to run against Harris in the Democratic nominating process.
Well, when I saw that Pelosi had come out against Biden, I knew it was over for him because the only thing sharper than her claws is the knife that she's holding that she's about to shank you with.
Yeah, and apparently she's told Joe that he could go the easy way, he could go the hard way, and that on Monday she'd lined up a whole lot of people, a whole lot of elected representatives to come out and say he's got to go. And that was one of the things that forced him out. And, the other story that is widely reported is when he was saying, I've got polling that shows me I can win. She demanded to talk to his campaign guy, Mike Dolan, and get him to explain the route to victory because she didn't believe there was one. And that turned out to be pretty much the truth.
Well, when old Nancy turns against you in the Democrat Party, you are finished, really. She's been there about as long as Joe Biden has, and she's a survivor. I might not like her politics, but I can admire her tenacity in getting what she wants. Yeah,
and they're the same as said about Mitch McConnell. He's an absolute master of political process.
And how does he survive?
By being ruthless and by being an exceptionally good guy with numbers, and like Pelosi, being an exceptional fundraiser, which means that he can fund campaigns and build favours that way.
What amazes me with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell is they're both distinctly unlikable people, and yet they get elected every time they come up for re-election. And without fail, there they are, like, the mythical lizard people. They seem to always be there in the thick of it.
Yeah, and it's a testimony to their professionalism and their raw talents. In the Democrats was worried about Biden, and no one seemed to be able to move him, but Pelosi did. And that is just, she's world class.
I'm looking at this race now, and I'm going back to your original statement that I've used for years, that it's harder to pick than a broken nose. Although I'd have to say that the advantage is slightly in Trump's favor. What do you think?
I think that the polls and the models reflect that, but they reflect that as of Sunday, and it's going to take probably a week for the first lot of polls to come through and really show what Harris is going to do against Trump. But I think you're right. Trump is slightly favoured at the moment, and the polling and the models all say that.
And I guess what'll firm up, that's the good thing about Nate Silver's models, is he's constantly updating them.
Yeah, and the other good thing about Nate Silver's model is he says, he's very direct about it. He says, look, I'm saying someone's got a 2 in 3 chance. It means they've got a 1 in 3 chance of losing. And I think that's likely to be that the model will be pretty close to even, and with someone slightly favoured, and he'll be saying, well, if it's a 60% in favour of winning, they've still got 40% chance of losing, which is quite high. And they're not going to be definitive. It's perhaps, or it's definitely not like 2008 and 2012, where it was pretty obvious that Obama was going to win both times if you followed the models, and you followed the models. And was it Leighton Smith that you won lunch off because he didn't believe the models?
Yeah, Leighton Smith didn't believe the models, and he was, backing, what's his name from Utah?
Mitt Romney.
a forgettable candidate at the best of times, but there was no way that Mitt Romney was going to win. And I made that bet on air with Leighton Smith at News Talk ZB, and he lost, and we had a sumptuous lunch down at
Yeah, and I'm sure you went, you didn't really want Obama to win, but you were just a realist about it. And I think that's probably the thing to bear in mind is you just need to be realistic. It's set aside your preferences and look at what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. In order to do what I do and what you do in this game of politics, it's not that you have to be right, but often we are. And the reason we are often right is because we just look at the data and remove the emotion from it. Whilst we might like, for example, Christopher Luxon to be, a popular leader, he's just not. And there's no amount of soft that's going to show that. And, I'm pretty sure that some of his caucus colleagues will be out-polling him if somebody bothered to do those polls.
Oh, I think it's just inevitable. His net favourables have never been very good, and he's not a particularly likeable person. We're just realistic about it. We don't necessarily care one way or another. It's just that's the reality. Luxon's net favourables aren't great.
Yeah, I mean, I literally don't care. I'm not a member of any political party. I'm a political commentator and a radio host and a journalist, and it shouldn't matter what I personally believe. I'm just going to call things as I see them and what the data shows me. And that's why, I'm regularly on the phone to our Pinko mate, David Farrer, so I can get the numbers to find out, where I should be heading on my reckons rather than tilting at windmills, which a lot of political commentators seem to do.
Yeah, and they project their values on the electorate, which just is dumb. And they also project onto the electorate that the electorate actually care. And, that's one thing to bear in mind in the US. If they have 50% turnout, it'll be about average. And that means half of Americans probably aren't going to vote. Some of them aren't going to vote because it's the Electoral College and there's no point. Their state is so one-sided, their vote isn't really going to matter. But most people aren't that engaged in politics. And it's one of the things that Obama's guys are constantly on about. It's not listening to political podcasts that the people that sort of stick their head up near election time and start thinking about whether they're going to vote perhaps as they walk into the ballot box. And that is what usually wins elections, is getting those swing voters who haven't made their mind up until the very last minute to vote in the favour of your candidate.
Well, it's as Maurice Williamson said, it could come down to as few as 55,000 votes across various swing states. I mean, you look at California, that's a lock. The Democrats are going to win there. The Electoral College votes will go that way. There's a lot of other states that are like that, but it's those swing states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and places like that, New Hampshire, that actually swing around, Georgia even, and those will be the ones that decide the election.
Yeah, I don't think New Hampshire's probably in play since Biden's gone. But the other ones, but Biden's route was really Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and he needed one other state. And, he was trailing so badly in Nevada and he wasn't going to win Georgia. Arizona, he wasn't going to win. Just not easy to see how we'd win those. And I think he was trailing in Michigan. And, he needed to for him to win, he needed to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, so it's going to come down to those few swing states. Now, give us your final thoughts, Simon, before we run out of time. What should we be looking for, and when will we get a sign about when that the election's going to fall one way or the other?
I'm not sure that we are going to get that. I think we may be wondering what's going to happen on election day. I think that there's still Harris has to be confirmed as the candidate, and then I'd expect we need a few weeks of polling to really know what her chances are. But I think that we can safely predict it's going to be closer than what it was when it was Biden. And I just tend to think anyone that is willing to make any prediction beyond that is probably not worth listening to. They're just, it's too hard to predict with so little data and in an electorate that is so close.
Well, that's right. The data's all changed now, and it's down to Kamala Harris, assuming that she gets the nomination from the Democratic convention. But I guess they're all locking in behind her now, so we'll see within a few weeks how the polls and how the models are shaping up, and then we'll get a better indication from them. But it's a completely open race again now.
Yeah, and a couple of weekends ago, we were very close to losing Donald Trump, and it's not impossible that could happen. You'd hope it doesn't, but it may, and that would change the dynamics again. So you can't be 100% certain of anything at the moment.
No. All right, Simon, thank you very much for your time this morning, and we'll have you back on the show again, no doubt, in the rest of the year. So looking forward to hearing your reckons again.
Thanks, Cam.
No worries. All good. As you can hear, Simon's dialed right into what is going on in US politics. That's why I listen and bounce ideas off him. Tell me what you think. Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for a reality check. Reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan.
You just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script.
Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Here's something new for breakfast listeners. You may be familiar with Olivia Pearson on the Friday political panel, but here's a repeat of last week's Olivia's views from The Crunch. And you can catch all of Olivia's views every 2 weeks on The Crunch on Thursday afternoons. Olivia Pearson, welcome back to The Crunch.
Thanks, Ken.
What have you got for me this week? Let me guess.
Well, yeah. Yeah, probably no surprise, but I'm going to talk about what happened at that rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday, so I'll just launch right in.
Go straight into that.
Okay. So, if angels fight, weak men must fall, for heaven still guards the right. That's Shakespeare's Richard II, spoken just before the king realizes that his kingdom has been lost. Well, I've never seen a man who is blessed with a more powerful guardian angel than President Trump. He came so close to death on Saturday at the rally in Pennsylvania, and the Secret Service clearly failed him. It was no thanks to them that he survived that first volley of shots. It came down to a random turn of his head. Then he dropped down to the ground before his bodyguards covered him and got him out. Thankfully, a SWAT team sniper took down the shooter. For someone like me who has followed Trump's dramatic foray into politics eagerly over the last 9 years, I can only say that I'm not surprised by what happened last Saturday, although I do remain thoroughly disgusted that his murder, in the minds of some, is a strategy to stop him from winning another election. Trump has had nothing from the political environment except demonization. From the moment he came down that Trump Tower escalator with Melania to announce his candidacy in 2015, the pitch of political discourse became febrile, and the whole media machine throughout the entire world mocked, derided, abused, and defamed him every single day and every single night. Yet, I watched him become a powerful and deeply effective president as his enemies indulged in every psychodrama they could think of, from false sex assault allegations to impeachment trials, Russia collusion and insurrection charges for January the 6th. But none of it worked. So he stalwartly tried again for a third time. That's hard. And this time being subjected to even more hostilities via weaponized lawfare, so his political opponents could besmirch him as a convicted felon throughout the election. But his favorable poll numbers just keep growing higher. Only a few weeks ago, we watched him try to do a debate with Biden where the world saw the truth of Biden's very real brain damage. And a coup within the Democrat Party was put into motion, led by Obama. Hubristically, a whole bunch of Hollywood actors, spurred on by George Clooney, voiced their vapid opinions in the mistaken notion that the world gives a hoot in hell about actors' political urges. The Democrats were in freefall as the party looked to be collapsing in on itself, just months out from the coming election. Then, lo and behold, an attempt on Trump's life suddenly occurred. The media spin is telling us it was a lone wolf shooter, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who seems to have the usual profile, friendless, funny-looking, social outcast, gun nut. Well, if anyone believes this lone wolf theory, then I have a big new shiny bridge to sell you at cost. The Secret Service are responsible for the security of these rallies. They send in advance teams to do a survey and then request the resources from HQ in Washington, D.C. that the team suggests are needed. The fact that at that rally venue, there was an unsecured open rooftop with a ladder only 150 meters away from President Trump's podium position is unheard of. If you listen to people who know how to do this job, such as Dan Bongino, who used to be a security agent for the Secret Service, Bongino told Fox News that we are trained out to 1,000 yards with the Secret Service counter-sniper team. How did they miss someone only 1/5 of the way there in broad daylight on a white roof? Bongino also said that he knows for a fact that the Trump team have been asking the service for more resources that have been rebuffed. A Secret Service spokesperson claims that this is a false claim. Bongino said it is not a false claim and that there needs to be proper congressional and oversight hearings into how the service so catastrophically failed not only Donald Trump, but also the others who were shot, one of them to death, 50-year-old much-loved husband and father, Corey Comparatori. Many people saw the shooter crawling around on the rooftop with his AR-15. They alerted police well before he was even set up and able to shoot off any rounds. Josh Hawley, Republican senator for Missouri, has written a letter to the Senate Homeland Security Committee demanding an immediate full investigation into the massive security failure that resulted in an attempt on President Trump's life and the murder of an innocent American. That letter reads, quote, "Although we do not have all the facts, the little that we do know suggests a staggering security failure. I call on you to launch a full, public, and comprehensive committee investigation into this assassination attempt and failures to adequately protect the former president. This investigation must include public testimony, hearings, and robust oversight over the relevant federal departments as they respond to this assassination attempt. Sworn testimony must be heard from Alejandro Mayorkas, Security of the Department of Homeland Security, and Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheetle, nothing should be classified or withheld from the public. End quote. The last thing Republican leaders want now is another JFK-style cover-up with the real facts of the intelligence agencies being classified and hidden from the public for the next 60 years. After Trump was inaugurated as president in 2017, it became a common occurrence for dumb celebrities to openly fantasize about his assassination. Even just off the top of my head, I can bring to mind several examples. Tasteless comedian Kathy Griffin holding up a severed Trump head, dripping with blood, while ISIS was rampaging through Syria and Iraq, beheading people in real time. Johnny Depp at the Glastonbury Festival saying, while off his face on drugs, "When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?" This said to great laughter and whoops from a zombified crowd of utter morons. Madonna admitting at a women's march while wearing her pussy hat that she had thought long and hard about blowing up the White House. Even though we don't expect much sense out of her plastic head, the bimbo foolishness of that statement said publicly was quite shocking. There was even a New York City production of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, which had Caesar dressed up as a Donald Trump lookalike, with wig, suit, and red tie, as he was stabbed to death on the Senate floor. These expressed fantasies about Trump's death became commonplace, normalizing talk of violence against the man. There were also the many, many commentators who constantly compared Trump to Hitler. One psychiatrist, Alan Francis, told Brian Stelter on CNN, quote, "Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century. He may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were," unquote. The entire Biden-Harris campaign message, on the odd occasion when they even bother to campaign at all, is built solely around Trump being a dictator if he gets into office again, who will end American democracy altogether. They have repeated over and over again that Trump is a threat to America. So the attempted assassination on Trump was an inside job. Trump's and America's real enemies, the Democrats, have a term they like to use called stochastic terrorism, where extreme rhetoric is used to intentionally incite random acts of violence. Here is the Bunny Boiler squad member, AOC, who has a particular fondness for this term.
I think it's uncomfortable serving with people who engage in what many experts deem stochastic terrorism, which is the incitement of violence an incitement of violence using digital means and large platforms so that individual themselves may not be the one that's wielding a weapon.
Glenn Beck was accused of stochastic terrorism, so was Alex Jones, and so, of course, was Trump. And now Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance, is being accused of it because he blames the White House for the attempted assassination of Trump. The left, with this one clunky, engineered term, combine their aversion to free speech with their love of fomenting violence, then claim it is a tactic that conservatives are using. Yet neither Beck, nor Jones, nor Trump, nor Vance actually have fomented violence through their rhetoric, but the Democrats sure have, because they have control of 80% of the 24-hour media machine on America's airwaves. They actually did manage to create a culture of violent hysteria. The George Floyd riots alone showed us that in 2020. And here is former Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill on MSNBC at the end of last year telling the world that Trump is more dangerous than Hitler and Mussolini.
I A lot of people have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler and the use of the terminology like vermin and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in. He is not trying to expand the boundaries of the United States of America. He's not trying to overcome a neighboring country like Putin is in Ukraine. He is not going for some grandiose scheme of international dominance. All he wants is to look in the mirror and see a guy who's president. All he cares about is selfish self-promotion. That's the only philosophy he has, which makes him even more dangerous because he has actually said out loud that it would be okay to terminate the Constitution to keep him in power. He said this. He actually said those words. And the irony is all of these supposed conservative folks that have populated the Republican Party all stood around and with their thumb in their mouth going, well, yeah, okay, I guess so. It's bizarre.
Trump never said to terminate the Constitution any more than he told people to inject themselves with household bleach to cure COVID. He said 2 years out of office that the widespread election fraud of 2020 should terminate the rules and regulations, even those found in the Constitution. And he was right. The Constitution does not allow for election fraud, so should have made that election mute. The Democrats subverted it, and the Republicans were too weak to hold them accountable because of the magnitude of deceit and lawfare under the guise of COVID that they managed to pull off. Trump never sexually assaulted any woman. He never committed any felony in any state, and he never incited any insurrection. But these people want everyone to believe that he did all these things and that he is worse than Hitler and Mussolini, which is to dehumanize him. Joe Biden said at his rally last weekend to camera, "It's time to put Trump in the bullseye." Now, this is how you can effectively push an assassination into the reality of human events without even having to bother with actively recruiting or training a patsy, a fall guy. All the Democrats have to do in this toxic environment that they consciously created is to pull back on security details, and a hate-fueled misfit will do the rest. So the pulling back on security details is exactly what transpired in Pennsylvania, according to Dan Bongino, and numerous other snipers, and ex-military operatives or ex-Secret Service agents who have come out of the woodwork to comment on the unbelievable negligence which took place at that rally. The protocol for a consciously created assassination or terrorist attempt then looks like this, and it is as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Create ridiculously extreme rhetoric and play it through all media organs 24/7, plus withhold what Trump needs to keep him safe, equals highest chance for optimal conditions for random assassination to occur. And after a violent act has occurred, all the Democrat leaders send nice messages of condolences and prayers to the family while hiding behind the ever-present farce of plausible deniability. This hit on Trump may be the clearest example of stochastic terrorism ever seen, a term Democrats pushed to attempt to morally condemn the rhetoric of others while they set about deploying it at Trump, knowing full well how it works. It's their baby. It's their term. They know that because it is their tactic and invention. Whether this assassination attempt was a case of that or a genuine patsy recruited for the job by the intelligence blob, which is highly possible given what a 20-year-old kid managed to achieve in broad daylight without being stopped, remains to be examined through proper congressional investigation. But it must be done and done swiftly. Either way, it was an inside job. But Trump still lives, and one can only put that down to providence. For he seems to have an important mission to accomplish in this lifetime that nobody else can do in such a manufactured climate of weaponized political hate. I believe Donald Trump is here to save the Republic. It's his destiny. And whatever gods may be, they seem to love him. And I do too. And that is Olivia's view for the Crunch this week.
Wow, Olivia, that was fantastic. But, you know, when you put it all like that, it does look like a strategy from the Democratic Party to kill Donald Trump. And if you go back to the Clinton years, what did Hillary Clinton talk about when she was campaigning against Trump? The deplorables.
Basket of deplorables.
Basket of deplorables. They're the people who support Trump. More than 50% of the voters. She described as a basket of deplorables. Biden, from the very get-go, has always demonized Trump. Just an hour before Trump took the stage to make that speech, he put on Facebook that the country needed leaders, not dictators.
Yeah.
And is it coincidental that there was an article, in a left-wing journal about him being Hitler-esque? Another one that described him as a Caesar. Numerous talking heads that say Trump must be stopped at any cost. Is it a coincidence?
At any cost. What the hell does that mean?
But
right there.
A threat to democracy, Hitler-esque dictator. The media are in on this. They even the thing about the Supreme Court that upheld the Constitution and said no, President Trump is protected by executive privilege. They now vow and declare that the Supreme Court has made him a king. Americans hate kings. Right? They deposed a king. They revolted against a king.
Sure did.
But all they said was, no, it's there in the Constitution. But somehow it was the Supreme Court creating Donald Trump as a king, again demonizing him.
Yeah, and that's also why they keep repeating this lie that he wants to eradicate the Constitution. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Democrats want the Constitution gone, not the Republicans. And I just want to say, Cam, too, that I felt very, very emotional when I saw Trump go down like that. It was very upsetting. I can only imagine how his family felt. They're messing with our guy, so hard. But then he stood up, pumped his fist, blood on his face, had the presence of mind to feel for the crowd and know what they were watching and speak to them, to let them know he was okay. And I got to say, I just burst into tears. And today, watching him walk into that Republican National Convention to great love from his supporters with a white bandage over his ear and tears in his eyes, he was moved.
Yeah.
My God, that undid me. And after such an emotional weekend where, I alternated between pure fury and tears to see what was done to him. But there he is, still standing and so strong, but still a little exhausted. I don't mind saying it made me blub.
What I couldn't get over was the absolute ham-fisted way the Secret Service acted. Now, Trump's a big man. He's 6'5".
No, he's 6'2".
6 foot. That's still a big man.
Yeah,
right?
He's a big guy. Yeah,
and they've got a bunch of pygmies that are protecting him. Well, they can't protect him. There's one woman security service person there who's standing in front of Trump, and her head doesn't even get to his shoulders.
I know.
Right?
Yeah,
so
DEI.
How can they protect somebody with a huge presence like that? And then, of course, there's all the videos of the blokes who were the Secret Service guys piling in on top, and then some of the also-rans. In fact, the ironic one is the short little dumpy one who couldn't even find her holster.
Yeah, and hid behind a barricade.
It was astonishing. But like you, I cannot believe that they left a rooftop which is effectively a chip shot, 140 yards, right? It's not even 140 meters, 140 yards. Someone who's skilled with firearms could make that shot at a president, even side on, because it's the only view that they had of Trump side on, and therefore the only viable shot was at his head. That's an easy shot for
even
someone.
even without a telescopic sight. That's quite an easy shot. Hey,
Yeah, it is.
If you're good.
If you're good without a sight, if you've got a sight, it's a piece of cake. Yeah, and to give you an example, I've taken people who are non-shooters to a range. I've stuck an egg on a post at 100 meters, and then within about 5 or 6 shots, they've been able to shoot the egg off the post.
Yeah,
it's easy to do. Yeah. So I can't believe that they had our rooftop unsecured. B, that the 2 guys who were on the rooftop behind Trump took so long to react when they were told. They must have had it in the earpieces. Hey, there's a guy with a gun, and
I know that's so suspicious, Cam.
So I agree. There has to be an inquiry there. But this reminds me, though, of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Now, Kennedy was going to withdraw from Vietnam, and the military-industrial complex thought, no, we're not going to have that, so they killed him. And who took over? Lyndon Johnson.
Lyndon Johnson.
And they stayed in Vietnam. Now, Trump has said he's going to end the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. And support Israel. More than Biden does. And, Trump's not talking bullshit about 2-state solutions either, is he?
No. So
he doesn't.
It's a terrible, terrible thing, but it's amazing he survived. And it'll be very, very hard for anyone to try and kill him now.
Look, I really feel that. I feel like the fog is lifting. Everything is being exposed, and there's still a ways to go, of course. We know we can't feel too lucky, but there's a change. I just feel people can see the Democrats for the evil party they are and the terrible things they've done. And the most beautiful thing to me is that people are now starting to see Trump as the real life political hero I've always known he was. We are damn lucky if a person like that comes along politically once in our lifetimes, and he is that guy. And I've always realized that. And he's taken on the whole establishment, and it has fired the full force of its hate against him. And here he is about to win another presidency. He is remarkable, and I feel lucky to be alive to watch this.
I mean, that's the thing, Olivia. The Biden campaign's entire narrative was that Trump is
a dictator,
a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
And therefore, he needs to be taken out. And they might say, oh, we meant electorally. We meant at the ballot box. Well, whatever. That's their rhetoric, that he is an enemy of the state.
Well, they came up with that awful term, stochastic terrorism. Their side use it. They know what they're doing.
Their entire campaign is based around that. They can't use that anymore.
No, they can't.
Right? And so, they've brainwashed the feeble mind of Joe Biden to say those words. Now he has to learn new words when he's in no state to learn new words.
To learn anything.
So can you imagine what the next thing is? I mean, it's insane. Right?
And can you imagine how good the debate between Kamala Harris and J.D. Vance is going to be?
Yeah. Kamala giggling Harris versus a guy who has been in the Marines, knows how to handle himself, and says some pretty amazing things himself.
Yeah, he does.
He's good enough to write a book.
Good. And everybody read Hillbilly Elegy if you haven't already. It is such a rollicking good read, and really touching. It's a very touching book about his upbringing, and his saving grace was his grandmother who raised him. And it was on it's probably still on the New York Times bestseller list. I mean, they only ever have 200 books up there at once.
I'll change it now, that's for sure. The New York Times will change that. Anyway, Olivia, great to have you on The Crunch again. It's a fantastic view, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of mail about that, which I'll forward through to you when it comes through.
Oh, great. Thanks a lot, Cam. Talk soon.
I know it's early in the morning, but there's a lot to understand with what Olivia just said. Tell me what you think about Olivia's view. Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Are you on the RCR mailing list? Never miss a beat of the news and hard-hitting stories you've come to know and love. Stay in the loop. Visit realitycheck.radio/email.
We live in a world where politicians and the media and the dominant culture is to slice and dice us and divide us. What I love about RCR is it brings us together, joins us up, makes us feel part of something bigger than us, and builds this great human connection.
Within 2 weeks of my having a show on RCR, we had journalists from the legacy media begging the Prime Minister to cancel RCR. That's how used to suppressing the truth the legacy media have become. That's how quickly we can make a difference. They failed to cancel me, they failed to cancel RCR.
It's all about freedom in the end. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of travel, medical freedom, freedom to bring up your own family as you see fit, freedom to say the climate crisis is a scam, freedom to say that the transgender movement is sinister, freedom.
It's absolutely vital we keep this narrative going because certainly the other side, the alarmist side, is really amping it up. I just find using climate and everything around climate, that was quite funny really, wasn't it?
We are here to really transform the shape of what media is going forward, which is such an honor and such an exciting stage to be in.
You've got to have both sides of the story, and that's what we're here to do.
We want to have these conversations. We want to be able to talk about this stuff. We want to be able to say the things that you guys are saying to yourself in whispered conversations in case someone else might hear at the supermarket.
Here what we get is a checking of reality. And checking out reality is the very essence of our mental health and our survival.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week, we'll find out what they think about the sacking of the Health New Zealand board and the gross overspending that's been going on in that particular area of health. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's go now to Cam's Morning Buddies. Good morning and welcome to Cam's Buddies in the morning this time, Miles.
Good morning, Cam. How are you?
I'm Box of Birds.
Excellent.
Got a tricky one for you. Everyone else is talking about US politics. I thought we'd talk about the debacle in the health system in New Zealand and the government on Monday sacking the Health New Zealand board, or otherwise known as Te Patu Ora, because they're exceeding their budget by $130 million a month and are staring down the barrel of a deficit for the financial year of $1.3 billion. What are your thoughts on that?
How excited am I that finally someone takes a stand and sacks the responsible people. And isn't it great that finally some responsibility gets sheeted home? And I'm very happy that this is the case, and I'm very happy that the government has done it. My true feelings are that there's a few other boards that need to have the same treatment. They need to be sacked outright as well. But let's return to health. What an indictment that the whole board has been sacked. It just goes to show how far the appointments made by the Ardern government went. And clearly it was the wrong way up a one-way street, and it just ended in everyone falling off a cliff. It's appalling.
It's just appalling. You've got Hipkins coming out and Aisha Verrill, obviously having designs on the leadership. She's busily telling everyone around Wellington she's going to be the next leader of the Labour Party. But they're all come out and said, this is appalling. We need to put more money into health. There's actually a shortage, all these sorts of things. And Shane Reety's pointed out, actually since 2018, there's been 2,500 more people who have been hired in the health system, not as doctors, not as nurses, not as specialists, not in any way, shape or form at the front line. No, these are middle managers and bureaucrats who are sitting in a swanky office somewhere.
Woohoo! let's take the knife to them, because by crikey, I'll tell you something for free. Health is just a boil on the bottom of the economy. And if we haven't got competent people in charge of those billions of dollars, how the hell are they going to be spent effectively? And, I get a little bit worked up with health. My father's been through the system, and I cannot see how adding layers of middle management helps performance at the sharp end with the heart problems, the hip problems, even the general accidents that the health system is supposed to look after. It doesn't. And this board, actually, I feel very strongly that they should be criminally liable for their profligate waste of money.
It's almost misfeasance. I see one of the doctors' unions has come out and said, we need more money spent on the front line. And, there's not enough money being spent in the health system. And on the surface, I agree with her, right? Because if you get rid of that 2,500 bureaucrats who no doubt are on in excess of $100,000 or more, then you should be able to pay doctors and nurses to fill those positions. So it seems a bit, ass backwards, to be perfectly frank, that the government who merged, or this was the Labour Party, merged all of these area health boards in the middle of a pandemic, I might add, on the basis that if it's centralised, it'll be better. And it clearly hasn't been.
Yeah. And if it's centralised, it'll be better mantra has been repeated by the Ardern government over quite a few sectors, and it has just been an absolute disaster. And the waste of money that was 3, 5, 7 waters is eye-watering, to say the least. And the waste of money...
I mean, you take the politics, what do they call it? What is it, T-pooking or something like that, with all these flash new cars, all sign-written, driving around, but actually the politics are all going broke because it's not being managed properly.
Yeah. So here we have the absolute myth of centralisation. What it means is there's about to be a profligate waste of money. And we've seen that in Auckland with the super city. It's just repeated endlessly. And our politicians, especially the Labour politicians who think that everything centralised and controlled is better, they'll never learn. And we will see in a few short years it all centralised again, and, it'll be just this never-ending cycle. But I'll tell you this for free. If the board members were made criminally liable for their mistakes, there would be a huge shift in the competency and a huge shift in their responsibility and getting it right. And, that's why I say that it is almost malfeasance. I agree with you.
Well, let's hope this is the start of the government actually grasping the nettle and starting to take an axe to non-essential services and get things back under control. And thank you for...
They have to clean house.
Thank you, Miles, for giving us a call in the morning. I know it's been a little bit tougher, but then we had to fill in for Paul Brennan while he moves to Queenstown.
Okay. Good on, Paul.
Thanks for your call.
Cheers. Bye.
Good morning, Lindley. Welcome to Cam's Buddies at breakfast.
Oh, well, if you want to be up at my time of the morning, I'd feel sorry for you. I've been out for a run, 4:20 a.m. this morning. And, pardon?
Good on you.
Yep, and I had breakfast long ago.
Well, I normally am going for a walk at this time in the morning, but, needs must. Here we are online and broadcasting the crunch at breakfast. So we've got buddies at breakfast. It sounds very alliterative, doesn't it?
Oh, I think it's outstanding, I mean, if I could get my phone outside, I'd get the birds to celebrate.
So, Lindley, you would have seen on Monday the Health Minister, Shane Reety, sacked the Health New Zealand board. Apparently, Health New Zealand has been overspending to the tune of millions of dollars a month, and are projected to have a blowout in their budget of $1.3 billion at the end of the financial year. Thoughts on that?
Yes, well, we actually discussed a little bit of this sort of stuff earlier, didn't we, earlier in the year, but far from me to understand the processes and even the people overseeing a health system, because it all changes quicker than I can blink. And on top of that, it would require me a week to find the statistics that I require for this chat as well. And I'm not really totally up with the play, you know, from the ins and outs of all of this, but I am in the human chain of using healthcare, so I can sort of come from that point, really. To me, the problem is obviously around gross overspending. And I do actually commend them for trying to do something or start to do something, because absolutely bizarre what's been going on. But to my simplistic mind, the causes of overspending has not been addressed or even known, and they have actually said that. They don't know what's going on financially at all. But what about a few obvious ones? What causes? What about increased immigration? In a decade, net immigration has shot up from 58,000 to 126. So that's more than double. Have we got double the infrastructure to match that? No, we haven't. And the rule should be infrastructure first and immigration second. But it does seem to me that in government spending, that never happens. It's always the opposite. And another disastrous example of buy now, pay later is going on with this practice. They just at it all the time, and then they borrow money to pay the interest, and it goes on and on and on. The bureaucracy has snowballed, so they say, especially backline staff.
2,500 staff in the back office since 2018.
Just ridiculous.
They spend $130 million a month over budget. Now, either the budget's wrong or they are just wasting money with gay abandon.
Well, I think it's the latter, you know, because we've had constant changes of names and protocols and all that stuff. That costs a lot of money to keep doing that. And the two health systems that we had, you know, what about that? I mean, that must have cost an absolute fortune in extra staff and bureaucrats to run that, and probably for no result whatsoever.
Well, when they changed it to Te Whātau Ora, every staff member would have got a new name badge, and that would have been not nothing. You know, that would have been a significant cost just on stupid name badges. I don't.
It'd be huge. And what about the frivolous waste of money on online services? And we talked about this another time. For example, Health New Zealand putting on its website an extensive article that would have cost money to do on dementia and picking your nose. And they've got step-by-step instructions on how to avoid the dangers of picking your nose, step-by-step on how to stop the habit. And then we find out it was never researched on humans anyway, just mice. Now, do mice pick their noses, and is that relative to humans? And what did it cost for this sort of rubbish?
Who was the researcher who had to sit there and pick mice's noses?
Well, yes. It's just unbelievable that anybody would actually press buttons to put that on their website, but that's Health New Zealand as it was.
Well, Health New Zealand also had instructions to all their staff on how you could improve your day by having starting every meeting with a karakia. Now, if you said, if you were in the boss of Health New Zealand and said, look, I'm a Christian now, or a Muslim, or Jewish, or anything else other than Maori, and you said we want to start each day with a prayer, there would be an outrage. But because you say it's a karakia, there's not an outrage, but now you've got, thousands of minutes a week being wasted on karakia and stupidity like that, which isn't helping people's health at all.
No, well, I think they probably should have been doing some Christian prayers. Thank you thank you, Lord, for what I'm about to receive, because I think that's what it's all about. It's about getting money.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because what do all of the media go to? They go to all these health lobbyists. They don't call them lobbyists; they call them health experts. But in reality, they're actually lobbying to have a bigger trough every single time. They're never looking at where the money is being spent. Is it being spent appropriately? You've got endless amounts of research, particularly in health, that is all about Te Ao Maori. That's being funded in a separate budget altogether, but largely that's where the research that mentions Te Ao Maori gets funded, and research into, I don't know, lung cancer or any sort of other cancers is scrabbling for money because unless they make it match some Maori overview or Maori perspective, it doesn't get funded.
Well, it's always been my argument for all these fundraising days going right back before they had two separate races in the system, raising millions of dollars to help people with cancer, and I do feel very sorry for them. But there's never any funding drives or research into cancer as long as I can remember. And that actually applies to overall health, because this is getting right into the cause of what the problem is. What's being done to improve health rather than treat disease? And unfortunately, Cam, there are trillions to be made out of sick people. And for every medication or medical equipment purchase, there's a profit for somebody else. And the pharmaceutical industry is dependent on those sick people. And this is my solution. Until we address that, things will never change. And let's cancel sex, gender education in primary schools and put health and lifestyle education in its place.
It's an interesting point you make there about medications that people are prescribed. They clearly don't work because they don't make you better. You have to keep taking them. All they're doing is treating symptoms rather than the actual illness or the disease. And so they say, oh, well, we need these drugs, and you've got to keep taking those drugs at vast expense, but they're actually not solving the problem. And that's where
they don't want them. They don't want it to solve the problem, because look, if you went round and you've had talks on there with your hair studies and the rest of it, and I think both of you and I have got a pretty good understanding of health. But if you got your health absolutely optimal, how many patients would there be?
Well, there'd be plenty of capacity for acute cases then, wouldn't there?
There'd be plenty of capacity for them. And then, because there's been some very sad cases, in only the last couple of weeks, in fact, some very tragic cases where diagnosis and everything were totally neglected, and deaths were the result of that. So it shouldn't happen. And you see, I can remember a time when it didn't happen. I can remember people would come into A&E and immediately get looked at and fixed up and, treated accordingly. But if you go into an A&E now, it's just crawling with people.
Well, they're often there because they can't afford the GP fees, so they're going there for things that people, you and I would go to a general practitioner for. But they're tipping up to the hospital and trying to get treated for, things that shouldn't be treated at a hospital. Hospitals, in my view, should be for acute or specialist care.
Yeah, well, I guess, I absolutely agree with you there, but what do people do when they ring up their GP and they can't get in for about 6 weeks, And I think there's a small percentage of people have cottoned on that if they ring the ambulance, they get they usually have to pay for the ambulance, but they'll get immediate and free care, in A&E, whereas if they have to get the GP, well, first and foremost, some of them have got to wait weeks, and then they've got to pay a consultancy fee on top of that. I think a few have twigged to that, but when I helped somebody in A&E, that's not what I saw. What I saw was people everywhere, and they were coming in. There was a queue with St John people pushing another trolley in with a woeful person on it, one after the other.
Well, I remember. I remember when I had, not pleurisy. I've forgotten now. Anyway, I ended up in hospital, got taken there by an ambulance, and for 4 hours I was in corridor space 2 at Middlemore Hospital.
I know, that's commonplace, Cam.
Yeah.
So anyway, I do applaud the government for at least having a look at this and putting the hot knife through the butter with the staff. I think that's quite a good start. I mean, if you don't look at a problem, you're never going to solve it, are you?
Well, that's right. And I'm a firm believer in all of these things, whether it's in business or in government, that what gets measured gets done. And, when the last national government was in, they had targets for people to be seen in emergency departments. Well, when Labor got in, they ditched all of those targets. They ditched all the waiting list targets. They ditched all of the things that were measuring performance, and the health system blew out because what gets measured gets done, and they weren't measuring anything, so nothing got done.
No, well, apparently none of them know, what the figures are around all that sort of thing, which is why they have sacked the board, isn't it?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The Labor government announced $1.9 billion for mental health, and everyone in the mental health system is saying, well, where's the money?
That's right. And that goes for a lot of other outfits too that thought they were getting money, and they never see it. It's a ticket clipping spree, really. It's just changed so much. But I do think, the major thing that has to be addressed, and not by sugar taxes and things like that, we need to educate the younger peoples on health and lifestyle and get them to start thinking, because, when I run along the road, there's cans and cans of soda pop and stuff and energy drinks and all that thrown on the road, Kentucky Fry cartons,
But a sugar tax won't work. I mean, Boyd Swinburne constantly goes on about needing to have a sugar tax and a tax on tobacco and a tax on this and a tax. He hasn't found a tax he doesn't like, and he's always putting out press releases talking about we need to have a tax on this. Well, they did a sugar tax in Mexico, and it failed because people just, let's say you have a 5-cent tax on a bottle of Coke. So now your bottle of Coke, instead of being $3.50, $3.55. Is it going to stop you drinking Coke? No, it's not.
Well, it won't stop me because I've never started.
No, but, they're saying that a tax will stop young people from drinking these drinks or having age restrictions. Well, how's that gone for smoking? That didn't work either. If you tell somebody you can't have something, guess what? They want it.
Oh, well, I think it would work even less with soft drinks and stuff like that, because they've got absolutely into the habit of it, And it's not sugar. Not everyone, but a lot of online gurus are saying sugar is poison and all this. But, we were raised, we had cereal and sugar, on our breakfast, and we had cordial that's got sugar in it and stuff like that. Never did us any harm at all. I've got beautiful teeth and, no tooth decay.
We were running around and burning off those calories, and our parents made sure we brushed our teeth before we went to school and when we got home after dinner. That's how we trained people to do things that are beneficial for them health-wise.
That's absolutely the truth, and that's why they should get rid of that sex gender tripe and put some lifestyle education in there. Yeah, that would make a difference, a significant difference. It would take a wee while to sort of take root, but it would make a hell of a difference. And it would also stop all these fad diets. We've sort of gone in a circle with them as if they're a solution to things, and they're not. It's your overall lifestyle is what counts.
Absolutely. All right, that's all we've got time for today, Leslie. Thank you for your contribution, and we'll talk again next week, but it'll be in the afternoon next week.
Okay, Cam. See you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good morning. Welcome to Cam's Buddies at Breakfast, Paul. How are you?
Very good, thank you, Cam, and good morning to you.
You might have seen the news on Monday. The government sacked the Health New Zealand board and appointed a commissioner. And the reason for that is the diabolical financial status of Health New Zealand, where they are exceeding their budget by approximately $130 million a month and are staring down the barrel of a $1.4 billion deficit at the end of the financial year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that's too good for anybody. I think that Christopher Luxon said that they were getting 16.7 billion more on a 30 billion total. And so when you see that that's the sort of thing that they're spending, and I've just had a friend who had his missus in hospital recently, and there was sort of only one nurse on, and they were saying, what's the story with where are all the rest of the nurses? One nurse was looking after 23 patients or something, and she was saying, there wasn't enough money for them. And then I heard Luxon say that there was 14 layers of management between number one and the rank and file staff.
And 2,500 more bureaucrats in the health system, not nurses, not doctors, not specialists, bureaucrats since 2018 for no demonstrable improvement in service.
Yeah, I see that the guy that I've put on there is Lester Levy, and he, I think, has done quite a number of things. I think he was part and parcel of doing the council amalgamation. And so I think whatever jobs he gets given to do, he can do it, providing the scope is there and correct. But with a name like Levy, I know he sounds like he's a Jew. I think he's a South African, but that Levy is definitely from Jewish origin. One would hope that he's got the ability to work out where the money should be going and how much and one thing or another. But I also heard him say he's got to have a lot of dealings with the unions and all those sorts of things. And when they say they sacked the board, I think most of them had resigned because of either things weren't going their way or whatever. So sacking the board sounds like quite an amazing thing that they think that they've done. But I think there was only one left, and that was, I think there was Roger Gerald. And I'm not even sure that when I see some of the things he was talking about, he seemed like a pretty woke sort of an individual. So who knows how it's going to go. But I think Shane Ritchie's on the right track. If people are spending a lot of money and putting layers and layers on top and with this amalgamation of the hospitals so that there was a board of health for New Zealand, but all they did was put everybody that was under the district health boards are still there. They just put another layer of management on top of them. Well, that didn't seem like quite the answer.
And gave them all new name tags at probably some exorbitant amount.
Yes. And I also think when you name things with silly names, you get the silly name syndrome.
Yeah.
And they've got names that I don't understand, like Takeover. What does that mean? What does that mean to most people? So in the end, I think what you need to do is say, what is it that you do? And if you're the health board, well, then you're the health board. And if you're the health commissioner, then you're the health commissioner. If you're going to sort the stuff out, then sort the stuff out.
Mm.
So I think he's an engineer, and he's got a few other characteristics in his bag of tricks, even though they call him a doctor. I don't know if he's a medical doctor or if he's a doctor of engineering. But he strikes me as he's starting to talk media talk so he can actually engage with the media about what he's intending to do, so that they don't automatically try and blow him up on his first week. Although I think he was the chairman before, if I remember, but he was appointed in March or sometime. And I think Lusk said he had put in an observer into the health board, so he was on the board watching what was happening. And after a few months of seeing things go crazy and then being told that there was a 130 million a month going west of the budget, which was already the thick end of 30 billion, well, you sort of think, I mean, in $1 billion and 30 billion is only 3% as a problem, but it's still a problem when you're getting less for more.
He is a medical doctor. He's qualified as a Bachelor of Medicine and also a Bachelor of Surgery, so he's a cutter as well as a normal doctor.
Okay.
But he's right. He's the chairman of a major engineering environmental consultancy firm. He's done some really big jobs. He was chair of a district health board, so he's got a handle on how it works inside the health system. He was then the chair of the Auckland District Health Board. So he's got his chops in professional ability to do the job, and he has a track record of succeeding at what he does. So it's early days yet, but let's hope he gets a good handle on this and starts to turn the health system into something that that it was imagined that it would be with this amalgamation. I mean, that's the stupid thing about it. Andrew Little is the health minister. In the middle of a pandemic, he dreams up this idea of getting rid of all the health boards, setting up this massive bureaucracy all in the middle of a pandemic and giving it a Maori name because that'll work.
Exactly. And now I think that they're trying to, at the very least, he's been able to have 3 or 4 other commissioners so that they could be doing it somewhat more local, because there's nothing like people in the area knowing what they need. And I see that Shane Wetty has also said that's the end of the Maori Health Board having a second tier of something else, and they're all moaning their guts out about that as well. But I'm thinking it wasn't a wise thing to start with, having such a racist department that depending on your race, what you get. And then I see that they're talking about also in that when asked, what have you guys achieved? The 2 major achievements that they said they'd done were able to stay going under the way things already worked. So I'm thinking, well, they didn't achieve anything really that wasn't able to continue under any other system. So I think that
they managed the decline in the health system.
Yes, they're able to manage it. And they're saying, a Maori's life expectancy, if you're a Maori male or female, is 7 or 8 years less than if you're a European. And I've always thought it's quite interesting that they never talk about what it was before colonialism came to town. And I think then it was, 30 years difference. So as the gap is narrowed to 7 years, and 7 years is still not good, a lot of folk have to be a bit responsible for their own way of life, because I think when you've got these things that are health boards that are for the sick, it would be good if they could actually put the fence at the top and here's some ideas to keep you healthy rather than here's some ideas to help fix you when you cook.
Well, that's what I was talking about with Lindley before you. I said the problem with the health system and the way that it's designed with a safety net at the bottom that's not rigged properly anyway, and some people fall through or crash into the rocks. And we're not actually fixing people. What we're doing is we're treating symptoms and giving them drugs. And you would think that if you took the drugs for a short amount of time that it would fix the problem. But no, you've got to keep taking those drugs for life. So they're not actually fixing anything about a person's underlying health. We're actually just treating symptoms and Band-Aid over it, and the costs go up and up and up because we've got an increasing population, which means we're going to have more of these things happening and more of those drugs being prescribed. And the only people winning out of this are the pharmaceutical companies, and we know how much we can trust them.
Exactly. And I see they're also calling for the resignation of David Seymour because he was saying that Pharmac shouldn't be considering the Treaty of Waitangi as its underlying principle when negotiating prices with drug companies, and are saying, oh, what a terrible thing for them to say. But what business does the treaty have in a negotiation over drugs and money? I mean, what they had a number of staff doing that he was saying, well, we're trying to get the best amount of drugs available for the most number of sicknesses that the people have that can do the best result. It's a negotiation in that regard, and having a portion of the department settling for making sure that they're in line with the treaty didn't seem to help. They did nothing in order to make drugs more accessible for the average New Zealander. So I'm thinking, well, he should be commended, not asked could he hand his hat in.
Well, the people who are making those complaints are also the same ones who talk about Maori science and Maori health and how we'd all be better off if we followed that. So why the hell are they concerned about negotiations with a drug company?
Interesting point you raise. And also, when you look at if we could get people less likely to be sick, as you say, symptom fixing isn't where it's at. Like if my car's got an engine that's overheating and I can see on a temperature gauge, if I cut the temperature gauge wire, it'll go down to cold. The engine won't change. So if you haven't fixed the underlying problem, and in the old days, and I know it's lots of old people, you think you're stupid old fool when they say that, but they used to do more exercise, they would have more sunshine on their person, they'd breathe fresh air, and there's a whole lot of things that you can do that make you a much healthier person. And so if we're looking at wellness medicine, they'd do a whole lot better than sickness medicine, is my view.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and that is the problem. We're treating symptoms. We're not actually treating the underlying illnesses. And if we fix the underlying illnesses, then they won't need any more treatment. Oh, hang on, that breaks the business model for pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, I know this young health professional woman who does contact care. I don't know how many of your listeners have heard of contact care, but I know that.
Right.
I know you have. But she does this stuff where she's fixing a whole lot of things which are preventative. And it's like there was a bureau on one of the movies I watched, a bureau of people who were going to commit crimes in the future, and they would arrest them knowing that they were going to commit crimes in the future, and everyone was saying how unfair it was. Well, some of these things that this physician does is she stopped you from getting an illness that you were about to get because of the different things that were obvious to her but not necessarily you, that were about to go wrong with you. And I look and I think she's got the idea really well of what she's doing, and she's saving a lot of people a lot of heartache and a lot of trouble, but it's often with little thanks because, and if any of you listeners look up contact care, there's a whole lot of things there that can really make a lot of difference to people who don't need drugs necessarily, who don't need vaccines necessarily. I mean, I'm not saying these things are not the right answer. I'm just saying there's a whole lot of things that can happen with a more holistic health view.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, I've used contact care significantly to, fix a couple of things that doctors had given up on with me, like keeping my potassium under control. Well, that's sorted now. And it wasn't done through doctors. It was done through contact care and people like Gary Moller and, a few other different kinds of treatment. I look at alternative treatments and I think there's something there that we're missing. And so I make sure that I am up with the play on those sorts of things and my health's a whole lot better as a result.
Amen to that, because these are good things that if you're working on keeping yourself well, and I know we're away from talking about the $30 billion and the $130 million blowout, but I think Shane's done the right thing. I heard Hosking talking to the Prime Minister on it, and I thought he was being a bit tough, saying, why didn't you fix it on day one when he arrived? And there's a lot of things you can fix on day one, but I think by getting a government advisor on the board to watch it like a sort of a monitor and getting a report and then acting on the report, I think that even though it's taken 6 months, I think that's about as timely as you could have done this, because I think it's a pretty big thing to appoint a commissioner. That's sort of, they say that's the strongest power that the government has at any of its government department type things to do. So that's taking about as strong an action as possible to take. So I think we could wait and see some great results come out of the health sector, or at least some good results.
Well, we should also look at some successes overseas. If you take countries like Switzerland and India, where something like 65% or higher in those countries of people are treated with homeopathy first, and only traditional medicinal solutions after. They've got greater outcomes of success that are happening. And again, it's that preventative thing. So if you look at things like contact care, homeopathy, and naturopathy, I think there's some insights there that we could learn and integrate into the health system as well.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. I've been to a homeopath not too long ago, actually, and the things that I was needing worked on, it seemed like, again, I couldn't get my head around how the most diluted substance of anything could actually make a blind bit of difference, except it did. And folk are saying, oh, is it psychosomatic? And I'm saying, well, no, I've got quite a strong mind, and I was thinking this ain't going to work. Not that it would, I was thinking it wouldn't. But it did. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, all power to you. That's actually another thing that I can look at and say, right, that's a winner.
Yep, absolutely. I've got Jack on the line now waiting to speak next, Paul. So thank you for calling in this morning. And next week we'll be back to our usual time.
Okay, take care. Bye for now.
Good morning, Jack. Welcome to Cam's Buddies at Breakfast.
Good morning, Cam. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. Got up a little bit early to do this show, but, needs must. We've got to all pull together sometimes.
How many coffees have you had?
Oh, I don't drink coffee. I don't like hot drinks. But bottles of Coke, it's a different matter.
Oh, okay.
So you would have seen on Monday, Christopher Luxon and Shane Reety announced that they were appointing a commissioner to Health New Zealand, sacking the board or what was left of them, because they're spending $130 million a month more than their budget and are looking at a $1.4 billion deficit at the end of the financial year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's frightening, isn't it? And this bloke they've appointed, he's got a good track record, so they're doing the right thing. I've had a personal experience of how bad the Auckland hospital system is, and I can tell you, it's not good.
Well, I can't complain about the treatment that I've had at the hospitals when I had my stroke and things like that, but that's rather acute, and they actually will rush to do things. But I do know that there are numerous people that have had poor outcomes as a result of understaffing or, just poor diagnosis or a whole number of other things that have happened. And we do definitely need to do something about our health system. And I think you're right. It's a good start having someone as competent as Lester Levy into that position so that he can start getting a grip on actually trying to make the health system the best it can be.
I agree. Well, all the nurses want to do is go on strike. Now, I know a doctor who works at Waikato Hospital, and he's furious at the lack of work ethic amongst the nurses here. Absolutely furious. He said they do the least amount possible. Obviously, that doesn't apply to all of them, but it's sort of what my experience was. Well, I was in there, and I won't know what it was for, but anyway, I was stuck in this room, totally ignored. I happened to be right opposite where the nurses' sort of desks were. And I listened for 2 hours. It was over 2 hours, actually. This nurse did nothing but talk to her boyfriend about what she was going to do on holiday, which was quite enlightening. I thought I knew this girl inside and out at the end of it, but not once did she glance my way or come over and say, hey, can I do anything for you? And I thought, oh, geez.
Well, that's because you're too polite, Jack, because whenever I've been in hospital, I've viewed the way that I interact with hospital staff. I'm not demanding or overbearing, but I'm certainly an advocate for my own health. And I'm not afraid to speak up. And if you just sit there and wait for them to come and do something, they won't.
No, it seems not. I mean, I had good experiences in there and real bad experiences. I nearly died as a result of some middle-aged doctor who told me, no, I couldn't possibly be having a gallstone problem if I had pains in my chest, and discharged me. It cost me $10,000 to get John Dunn to take a 3-centimetre gallstone out, just a short while later, and he said, you nearly died. And when I read on the internet, as you do, you go to Google and say, what are the symptoms of, chest pains, heart attacks, whatever, and they say number one on the list was, could be confused with a gallstone. And I thought, what the hell?
Oh, well, there you go. See, that's the experience I've had with specialists at hospital. After I had my stroke, I had this eminent neurosurgeon come in and they gave me some tests for 3 or 4 hours, and he came in and had a whole bevy of people around, and then he told me in very stern terms that it was a very serious stroke that I'd had, and that the prognosis for recovery was not good, and that I was never going to use my right arm again. And I said to him, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, you're going to have to learn to write with your left hand. Because I have no confidence in anything he says after that because I'm left-handed. And he didn't know that, even though they ask you 4 or 5 times, during the day, are you left or right-handed? They ask you over and over. You get sick of answering it, right? But he didn't even read the notes, and here he was telling me I was going to have to learn to write with my left hand. Well, I got that nailed, and then I got the recovery in my right hand nailed as well. So, I don't have a lot of confidence in professionals who have specialized so highly in one particular area. They're just not open to the idea that people can recover from things if only you'll give them a chance.
Many of them seem to be enamored by their own wonderfulness. That's only a few of them. There are some good ones, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak highly enough about 2 of my GPs that I had considerable interaction with, very compassionate doctors, and actually solved the problems. But it's like school teachers; they're few and far between. A good school teacher is few and far between. The rest of them are, it's just dross usually. Well, it's the same in the medical profession. There's really, really good surgeons and specialists, but they're few and far between. The rest of them are also rands.
My GP in Parnell, Richard, that saved my life at least twice in the last 40 years. But once you've got a good GP, man, you have to stay with them.
Yeah, well, one of my GPs retired, and I was really annoyed about that. And when I saw his replacement, I said, well, we're going to start on the training program now because I need to train you up to the level I had the last GP. And she got all upset about that. And I said, well, fit in or I'll get another one. But she's coming along nicely.
Yeah, well, you're only a young fella.
Exactly.
I've outlasted at least 4 or 5 previous GPs until my current one, and I was the very first patient. I've been my GP for 42 years.
Oh, dear Lord. It's like Dad. He's outlived all the GPs that he's had, and now he's got another one.
Yeah, I have to keep saying to him, please don't retire. I'm sick of finding new doctors.
Yeah, new doctors that do what you want.
Yeah. But anyway, Les Levy's a good bloke, I believe.
I think so.
Out.
I mean, he runs an engineering firm, so you should like that.
What sort of engineering?
Tonkin and Taylor.
Oh, does he?
I
didn't realise that.
He's a medical doctor and a qualified surgeon, and he's also the chairman of an engineering and environmental firm, Tonkin and Taylor. He's got the skills.
He's got the skills. He's a superman.
He is.
And he will fix it if anyone can.
Yeah, maybe we have to call him Lester I don't know, it doesn't rhyme. I can't work that one out. Bob the Builder worked, but, Lester's going to
Anyway, I don't know what your specialist was saying about you because when I spot you, you show no indications to me of ever having a stroke.
Well, that's because is a case of mind over matter. I didn't mind and he didn't matter. All right, Jack, thanks for coming in this evening, and we'll talk again next week, and it'll be in the afternoon.
Okay.
Thanks,
See
Jack.
you again, and stop getting up so early. I hate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Right. Good morning, Jimmy. Welcome to Cam's Buddies at Breakfast.
G'day, Cam. This is a bit early, isn't it?
Well, you know, we've got to help Paul. He's busily moving his household and family down to Queenstown, so we all chipped in and filled in for him. And I drew the Thursday slot being my normal day for the show. We just did it at breakfast instead of at 4 o'clock.
Oh, well, you've got the rest of the day free, mate. Now, what's your subject this week? There's plenty on board, plenty on offer.
Well, everyone else is talking about US politics, but I thought I'd get the buddies to talk about the health system in New Zealand and the necessity for the government to appoint a commissioner to Health New Zealand, because they're spending something like $130 million a month more than their budget and are projected to lose $1.4 billion for the financial year.
Well, it's just another massive cluster from Chris Hipkins, isn't it?
It's an omni.
Just not surprising. Who was the last Minister of Health in the previous?
Andrew Little and Aisha Verrill.
Oh, yeah, then Verrill. Yeah, I mean, everything that Labor did, the centralisation of everything. So this happening is just not surprising, and there'll be more to come, more departments. The government is just giant and inefficient and poorly run. It's not like the health department doesn't have enough money. They have about $6,000 for every Kiwi alive.
The Labor ministers had the reverse Midas touch, a literal poo, a literal poo finger, and everything that they touched turned to poo.
Well, they just got no idea. They just want to make the bureaucracy massive, but not actually deliver the product. I heard on the radio that there was 14 layers of bureaucracy in some parts. It's insane.
14 layers of bureaucracy, 2,500 more bureaucrats in the health system rather than doctors and nurses and specialists.
And they cost heaps to run. So the money's going to pay these, just sit and have meetings all day and make decisions, but they're not actually helping patients at the front end. It's just no private company would act like this. It's just the government. And it's everything Labor stands for is giant government, inefficient meetings, bureaucracy. It's mind-blowing. And they all do it. Like look
and
here.
An astonishing waste of money.
Oh, it's truly mind-blowing how much money. Look at the government as a whole, how much it was, spending. Look at the state of our economy. Queenstown shops down a third of turnover, a third down.
Well,
how can people survive?
Industry is down 65%.
Yeah, I mean, how can we survive? I mean, I'm hearing of sawmills empty, no wood going through at all, none. It's staggering. I would say New Zealand's heading for a depression, eh?
Well, that's the thing.
It's bad news everywhere.
The politicians don't seem to know what's going on out in the street, and neither do people unless they're directly affected, because they always go, oh, we should be spending this on the health system. We should be spending that. And you say, well, where does that money come from? Oh, the government. Well, it doesn't come from the government. It comes from our back pockets.
Productive people.
And we've got these trophers in the health system that have been enriching themselves and not delivering better outcomes in health. I mean, they have a policy in Health New Zealand that every meeting starts with a karakia. If you try to say, I want every meeting to start with a Muslim prayer or a Christian prayer, there'd be howls of outrage. But because you say it's a karakia, I know no one's allowed to speak out about that.
I know, isn't government supposed to be secular?
Well, that's exactly right. But we've got this adherence to Maori mythology that, that there's a god for the sky and a god for the earth and a god for the forest and a god for the ocean. And that Te Ao Maori health outcomes will be improved if we, just followed Maori science and Maori health. Well, how did that work for them before we got here?
It's just more woke mind virus crap, mate, and it's not helping us. Imagine the government's tax take next year because the economy is terrible. No one's going to be making much profit. Imagine the difference between the government spending and the tax income next year is going to be massive. It's going to be harder to balance the books.
Oh, absolutely. It will be.
And no one's talking about it. To be honest, I've had so many people complaining to me in the last sort of week or two just about the state of their businesses or laying off staff, or they've got no work, like literally no work. And I just worry about it. And it's bloody Maori Kakira at the start of a meeting. I mean, it's just pathetic. We can't go on like this. The health system is just another system of labour, mate. They tried to centralise it, made it too big, made it giant bureaucracy, and it's just a terrible outcome. And hopefully it can be fixed before everyone leaves to Australia.
Well, I think Lester Levy's the guy to do it. He's got, good credentials. He is actually a doctor and a surgeon. He's been the chair of the Waitemata Health Board, the Auckland Health Board, and he's fixed up several other organisations along the way. So, it's interesting that he's been chosen to do that. Hopefully he will be able to fix it. And if anybody can, it's him.
Well, that's good, because I see on X that the most wokest people hate him, so that means he must be effective. So I wish him all the best. I mean, we need to turn the country around. I've never, ever seen it in a state like it is, actually, on all fronts. So, yeah.
Oh, totally. Anyway, Jimmy, I better let you go. You can go off and catch a coffee now to wake yourself up, and we'll be at normal time next week. Thanks for calling.
Okay. Thanks, Cam. Have a great day. Cheers.
It's always interesting to see what the person on the street thinks about these sorts of announcements, and today was no different. Tell us your thoughts on Cam's Buddies by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
And now it's time for the infamous whale bag. We've got a fair few things here, a few comments on my interview with Glenn Thurston. He's the founder of Mental Hunts. He dialed in to discuss mental health and firearms ownership and his work to support his community. Beth emails and says, a fantastic discussion with Glenn, Cam. Sounds like a lovely chap. It's important to talk about mental health, and particularly with our men, as they're buggers for keeping it bottled up. R writes and says, I love the crunch. Thank you for the interview with Glenn Thurston. My husband just had his firearms license renewed, only took 12 months. The interview with me was actually hilarious, but you can't laugh at the questions. That's a big no-no. I'm putting off renewing mine due to the hoops. They're more worried about one's mental health than any other aspects of the license. It's complete BS. There's some comments about my Olivia's View segment and her perspective on the attempted assassination of President Trump. Mary writes and says, brilliant, Olivia, excellent dialogue. Anonymous comment says she had her finger on the pulse just like the majority of RCR listeners. Peter from Hamilton writes and says, excellent interview by Olivia Pearson on The Crunch. Thank you for your efforts to get the truth out. Mike from Foxton sends a lovely message. He says, could you please say thank you to Olivia for me for such an interesting and detailed review of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. I really enjoyed Lindsay's perspective on it, and Olivia's view brought even more clarity for me. Again, bravo, Olivia. You truly do bring the right stuff and so personal with your feelings. True humanity. On Facebook, Lee said, this was great. I could hear the emotions in her voice and it brought tears to my eyes. Now some thoughts from my Cam's Buddy segment where we discussed Trump's assassination attempt. We've got a very long one from Diane on the Trump assassination attempt. It was good to hear everyone's thoughts. I agree with all your buddies and Olivia. I don't think we need a tinfoil hat. It was quite obvious he was set up. It can't be blamed on incompetence. We have hundreds of social media clips now, including videos of supporters telling us what happened. These people said the first day there were 2 shooters, one on the building, Crooks, and one on the water tower. 11 shots were counted from 3 shooters, including the Secret Service officer. Also, if you look at the video of the Secret Service officer on the roof, Trump is still talking when he fires his first shot, which I thought was odd. Crooks looks to be the patsy. They are now saying he had a white van full of explosives parked nearby 10 miles away. So the FBI want us to believe he brought a ladder from a hardware store, carried that and his rifle across the car park, scaled the building without anyone seeing him in an area supposedly locked down 2 days before the rally. Then he was going to walk back to the van and blow something up. He must be a bloody mastermind at 20 years old. Seems like a distraction while the real shooter just walked away. You'd be surprised to know there's a 2024 Can-Am Games where police, fire, shooting specialists are gathered just down the road in Butler. Now, isn't that a coincidence? The BBC were in the same hotel. The name Yerrick has been mentioned a few times, someone of interest. We will see. I hope Trump has his own people investigating, otherwise we may never get the truth. He did look shell-shocked at the convention. Maybe he never thought they'd try and take him out. Keep up the good work. On my Hugh Devereaux Mac interview of 11 July, he was the spokesperson for the Council of Licensed Firearms Owners. And we shared a soundbite from Hugh's interview on Facebook in which Hugh said a lot of New Zealanders don't understand that if police want to raid a gang house to go after drugs or anything else, they need a search warrant from a judge to approve that. If you're a licensed firearms owner, you give up that right, and I don't see how that can be deemed an appropriate thing that the rest of New Zealand should be happy with as a precedent. And Andrew responded on Facebook, and he said, my best bet it's about the assignation threat. Maybe the mongrel mob would never do that, no money in it. So government doesn't care about them. To say having guns to conduct a civil war if government goes North Korea level rogue would be useless. Thousands of cheap sniper and grenade drones already holding your face biometric on its auto hit list makes Wild West technology totally redundant. And finally, to wrap up the whale bag for this week, we have another comment from Andrew, and this time in response to my interview with Catherine Ennis-Carter at the end of May, when I chatted to her about housing issues and the impact on poor policy making. And Andrew writes and says, can I respond to Cameron's assertions around housing from his group discussion show? Cameron stated that a collapsing housing market will be terrible for small business. Okay, if you collapse house prices, then small businesses that need to borrow on their houses could presumably struggle for a time. Worst case scenario, some will have to sell up or liquidate or even go bankrupt. An economic disaster? Not really. Always remember the real economy is made up of real stuff and people doing real production, and the real economy is going nowhere should the housing market collapse. Yes, there'll be some tears if the resale value of houses collapses, but there will be little real reduction in real material living standards and in the long term vast improvements. The tears we have now with current outrageous house prices are serious. We have people having less kids, no kids, or breeding uncomfortably close to menopause due to cost. And how do you want to define a failed society? A failure to breed is about as basic as it gets. We need the bit of medicine. The housing market needs to collapse. If you're on the ball, you can sell your house or houses before the implosion. Nothing to personally worry about. In fact, you can profit in the repurchase later, as gross as it might all feel. There's something inescapably sorry about explicitly profiting from other people's blatant naivety, alas. And that's the whale bag for this week.
Thanks for tuning in to RCR, Reality Check Radio. If you like what you're listening to, or even if you don't agree with what you're listening to, then get in touch with us now. You can text us with your message to 2057, that's 2057. Or if you'd rather email us, you can at inbox@realitycheck.radio. We would love to hear from you, so get in touch with us now.
That's it for the Crunch at breakfast. Politics is a fast-moving game, and you have to stay sharp with all the changes that often come out of left field. In just 2 weeks, the entire US election has been upended. Firstly, with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, then the sad demise of Joe Biden, leaving the Democrats in utter disarray. But never fear, we're here at The Crunch to get you the in-depth takes that you need. Maurice Williamson gave us a former diplomat's view, and Simon Lusk shared what a political analyst sees. And of course, we have the brilliant Olivia Pearson giving us her views. I've enjoyed bringing The Crunch to you at breakfast time as Paul Brennan moves south. Next week, he'll be broadcasting from the brand new studio in Queenstown. Now, you can keep up with all my shows and indeed everyone else's shows by using the RCR app, and you can even use the app to stream live. Big thanks to the team that helps put together this show and makes it all work. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week, even though it was an early start. I'm loving all your feedback, really enjoying talking to so many people sharing their thoughts on politics, life, and everything in between. So a big shout out to all of you, and thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget email suggestions to inbox@realitycheck.radio for people for me to interview, and let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of some of my best interviews from The Crunch as we continue our breakfast takeover. First up is a replay of my interview with One Nation Party Senator Malcolm Roberts, who calls a spade and doesn't mince words. And then a real favourite of the listeners, Simon Anderson, who talks about how he got started as a citizen journalist. And finally, a replay of my interview with Nathan Smith for a little bit of mental stimulation for you all at breakfast. I'm looking forward to having you joining me again next week for The Crunch with Cam Slater.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.